Chapter 161, On the Verge of Breaking Out. The reconstruction of the arena, built on the site of the old jousting grounds, was advancing at an astonishing pace. With abundant tools, materials, and manpower, the expansion had taken shape in just over half a month. The archery range and the nightly lists were largely finished. Targets stood in neat rows, and the wooden rails gleamed with fresh paint in the sun. Quentin's report said the main arena would need another month to be completed, but its grand outline was already visible. Tiered stands were rising, layer upon layer, destined to hold thousands of spectators. Gerald Dane's assessment of the hired knights had been completed a week earlier. He had sifted them like wheat from chaff, discarding those who were merely filling quotas or whose records were poor, leaving 276 qualified fighters, 70 cavalrymen, 110 infantry, and 96 archers. After signing each of their contracts, Arthur kept his promise. The craftsmen of the blacksmith district worked through the night to distribute full sets of standard equipment. When the men felt the weight of new armor and gripped fresh weapons for the first time, their eyes lit up. Faces that had been grim and tired brightened with the joy of a promise kept. A few scattered shouts of "Long live Starfall City" rose up, and the rest quickly joined in. Long live Starfall City! Long live the Sword of the Morning! The chant continued for a solid 5 minutes, until Arthur raised his hand and quieted them. He watched from the edge of the lists, mounted on Z, as Rozo Brune directed the newly formed cavalry. Sunlight caught his purple eyes, and his expression was one of quiet satisfaction. The cavalry unit, besides the 70 new recruits, drew several knights and squires from Starfall's own ranks to form a standing force. They had been split into 10 squads, each a dozen or so men, practicing maneuvers. With the bugler's clear notes and Rozo Brune's barked orders, the riders flowed like a torrent of steel, shifting from a long line into a tight column, then closing to a wedge in an instant. Hooves thundered, the ground trembled, and dust rose into a golden haze. Gerald stood beside him, his purple cloak fastened to black vine-patterned armor with a sword-shaped hook. "They're already seasoned fighters," he said. "Almost all of them have seen real combat. Once they understand the commander's orders and the bugle calls, a little drilling will make them ready." He paused, then added more quietly, "Practice is one thing, going into battle is another." "True," Arthur nodded, his hand falling to the hilt of Azure Wave at his waist. He remembered commanding cavalry against the Vulture King west of the Torrent River 2 years ago, how only the first charge had kept formation. After that, once the fight broke down, the riders abandoned drills and followed the standard. On a chaotic field, complicated commands are useless to men who haven't trained together for long. The simplest beats, forward, retreat, charge with me, are often the most effective. After watching a full circuit of training, Arthur rode over to praise Rozo Brune and the troop with a few words, then headed toward the archery range with Gerald. As they walked, Gerald's brow furrowed, and his unease slipped into a low question. "Arthur, why keep the men we rejected inside the city?" "They'll be resentful," Gerald said. "Confident in their own strength, they could become an unstable element and cause trouble." Arthur's lips curved. He looked toward the archery range. "There may be a place they can be useful soon, though I'm not certain. Fortunately, they cost only about a silver stag per man every 2 days. Not expensive. If things go well, we'll see results in another half-month." At the range, Jimmy and Ongai led 40 archers, 20 each, in long-distance practice, while other archers watched and learned. On command, 40 longbows were drawn in unison. Arrows shot up like a sudden shower, arcing and landing together in the marked area, some 230 to 240 meters away. The grouping was tight. The training was clearly paying dividends. "Lord, how's our training look?" Jimmy jogged up with Ngai, both flushed and proud. Jimmy wiped his brow. "As you told us, we picked the best shots and focused on long-range fire." "You've done very well," Arthur said. Accuracy mattered on the lists, but on a real field range and rate of fire were often decisive. Archers with reach could strike first and deliver extra volleys as enemies closed, crucial in a charge. Arthur was itching to try the Kirin bow. Zach had handed him when the sound of hooves cut through the air. Everyone turned. Fat Karen tore across the field, sweat sparkling on his forehead, panic written on his round face. Arthur sighed inwardly. No shooting today. Karen skidded to a stop, dismounted, and panted out his news. "Lord, Sir Bard at Ironstone Fort sent word. There's trouble on Red Mountain. The Vulture tribe has risen in rebellion." Arthur handed the Kirin bow back to Zack, voice steady. "Jimmy and Guy, gather all archers and infantry in the lists. Ride to Shingi Fort and await orders. Gerald, round up the men we rejected. Now's the time to use them." "Right, Lord." The three officers dispersed with no hesitation. "Let's move to Shingi Fort. Tell us what's happening as we go," Arthur said to Fat Karen, who was still catching his breath. Karen remounted and raced alongside them as the group sprinted past the archery range. Arthur summoned Rosso Brun to bring the cavalry too. By the time they reached Shingi Fort, Karen's breathless account had painted the broad strokes of the crisis. Cheon, the Vulture King's son, had allied with barbarian tribes upstream on the river and with the Bremon family to spark a rebellion. Xiongni, leader of the Shixiong tribe and the instructor Arthur had recruited for the Mountain Legion, had been killed. Cheon and his allies had struck the Shixiong camp in Red Mountain, routing and splintering it. The rebellion had already set the region on edge. Chapter 162, Response Deployment. Inside the council hall of Shingi Fort, the oak table was spread with a parchment map, its surface lit by bronze candlesticks at the four corners. Arthur's finger traced the Red Mountains slowly. His brow was drawn. Candlelight flickered in his violet eyes, reflecting a complicated thought. He had meant only to push Sir Bard to relocate families and expand the army, to flush out the disobedient tribes and deal with them at once. He had not expected that a single strike would stir up so many venomous snakes. A cold smile touched his lips as his fingers tapped the tabletop. Better to have problems exposed than to have them lurking unseen. Xiongdi, eldest son of Xiongni, knelt on one knee, his voice choked. "Lord Arthur, you must do justice for my father, for the Stone Bear tribe." He wore the Mountain Legion uniform. The seven-pointed star on his chest caught the candlelight. His eyes were bloodshot and his hands clenched white. "May all those traitors go to the seventh hell." Over the past 2 years, the Stone Bear tribe had moved much of its people from the Red Mountains to Violet Canyon, leaving only a few behind to guard the old lands. Most of those who moved to Violet Canyon had converted to the Seven Gods, and Xiongdi himself had become a devout follower. He had marched with Arthur, clearing bandits in Starfall's territory, and had become a backbone of the Mountain Regular Army. "Your father, Xiongni, did great service for the Legion," Arthur said as he wrote swiftly across the parchment, the quill scratching. "The Stone Bear tribe has always respected and cooperated with Starfall City. I will see justice done," he added, and with the final stroke, he sealed the document with Starfall City's double seal and his personal stamp. "You will gather the able-bodied young men of your tribe and present them to the Mountain Legion camp for duty." Arthur slid the parchment across the table. It was a commission and a reward. Recognition of Xiongdi's succession, a grant of land in Violet Canyon with the right to build a castle or manor, and appointment as commander of the Mountain Reserve under Sir Bard. Xiongdi trembled as he took the document. He had been taught to read by his father and stood stunned at the generosity of the terms before falling to his knees and striking his forehead on the stone floor. "Lord, I don't know how to thank you for this grant. I swear I will earn merits worthy of it in the coming war. May the Seven Gods bless Starfall City forever." His chief purpose in coming had been to ask Starfall City to avenge his father and to win recognition as chieftain in waiting. The land and title were beyond what he had dared hope for. "If you distinguish yourself in battle," Arthur said, "I will have you knighted at dawn in the holy sept of Starfall City." Xiongdi's excitement was almost incoherent. After Arthur inclined his head, the young man backed from the council hall, his steps light and his expression set. Arthur pushed forward a document marked with red handprints and the intercepted correspondence between the Vulture tribe and the Brahman family. "Thoughts?" he asked the others. "Speak freely." Sir Barton, who had ridden hard from Starfall City, was first to answer, his gray beard quivering. "This war is unavoidable, Arthur. We must summon all our vassals. This rebellion is no small thing." Gerald Dane toyed with the dagger at his hip, eyes flashing. "I missed the battle 2 years ago. Now I can make up for it." Jimmy rubbed the bowstring between his fingers. 2 years ago, I was wounded at Lighthouse Keep and couldn't take part in the suppression of the Vulture King. That regret has stayed with me. Thank the new and old gods for this chance. And Guy said bluntly, I grew up on the borderlands. Barbarians fear force more than they respect kindness. You have to beat them into submission. Rosso Buren stood in the corner, expression unreadable. The cuts on his cheek had healed into a lattice of pale scars, but when Arthur mentioned knighthood, a fierce light flared in his eyes. If I fight well, will you knight me as well, Lord? I do not play favorites, Arthur replied. Roso's scarred face reddened. Fat Karen and Maester Yi exchanged looks. The room full of warmongers made Arthur feel steadier. He wiped sweat from his brow. Since we are going to war, Maester Yi said, should we not blockade the port and prepare supplies? We must requisition ships at Starfall Port. Sir Barton cut in. I arranged for that on my way here. We cannot risk news leaking and complicating things. After everyone had spoken, Arthur rose. The candlelight stretched his shadow long against the stone wall as he began issuing orders. Maester Yi, write letters summoning our vassals. Tell them the situation and order them to gather their levies at Highgarden to be trained and commanded by Sir William. Have Sir Greg of Vulture Watch keep eyes on the Red Mountains and report any movement immediately. Ask Viscount Dimitri of Highgarden to watch whether the Brahmin family is mobilizing. Maester Yi recorded each instruction with a steady hand. Sir Bard, Arthur continued, Starfall's direct forces and levies will assemble and train here at Shingi Fort under your command. Rosso Buren, you will lead the cavalry to Vulture Watch to assist in defense and reconnaissance, prevent small barbarian bands from infiltrating and harassing, act as the situation requires. Karen, you handled supplies in the war against the Vulture King. This time you take full charge of provisioning. Nick will assist you as quartermaster. I trust you will do better this round. Fat Karen's round face fell at the responsibility, but he nodded under Arthur's gaze. Supplies offered opportunities for profit, but they were tedious and thankless work. Gerald, Arthur added, you will garrison Ironstone Stronghold with Jimmy, Guy, and the newly recruited warriors and archers. Once internal arrangements were set, Arthur moved to external measures, his voice hardening. Have Sir Bard send summons to every chieftain in the Red Mountains, reminding them they swore fealty to Starfall. Order them to send their heirs to Ironstone Stronghold as a sign of loyalty. He tapped the table with emphasis. If any of them join the Vulture Tribe's rebellion, not a single member of that chieftain's house will be spared. No mercy. Also, he added with a cold smile, publicize the reward I have granted the Stone Bear tribe. Continue to announce the Mountain Legion's expansion. Any free folk of the Red Mountains who do not wish to join the rebellion may seek refuge in Violet Canyon. Anyone who captures or kills a rebel chieftain will be immediately enrolled in the expanded Mountain Regular Army and rewarded with fields and orchards in Violet Canyon. Sir Bard asked, and the Brahman family? How shall we deal with them? Arthur considered, then said, tell them the barbarians have been forging letters and sowing discord. Urge them not to do anything that will cause Starfall City to misinterpret their actions. One by one, the orders were given. After 2 years of quiet, Starfall City stirred like a waking giant, revealing its fangs. Messengers rode in every direction. Ravens were sent from the roosts. Forges in the blacksmith district burned through the night, and warships in the harbor took on supplies. In every quarter of the city, the grim air of an approaching war settled like a shadow. Chapter 163. Go straight to the Vulture Tribe's nest. After assembling Starfall City's direct guard and archer units and running a day of joint drills, Arthur led his force to the Mountain Legion station. At dawn, 400 guardsmen in chainmail, long swords at their hips, and 300 archers with longbows slung over their backs and heavy quivers moved out from Shingi Fort, crossed the Torrent River, and advanced along the repaired stone road. Faced with the threat from the Red Mountains, Arthur had no intention of waiting defensively for conscripts from other regions to finish their training. Times had changed. He could not allow the wildlings to ravage the west bank of the Torrent River, territory he had worked 2 years to secure, while he bided his time. Nor would he rely now on a Ruidong River line of defense, and wait for the perfect moment to fight a decisive battle as he might have once. With Sharpwing's high-altitude reconnaissance and the southern barbarian invasion, the Red Mountains were no longer an insurmountable barrier for him. Arthur had learned that firsthand when the mountain regulars had swept almost effortlessly through bandits and raiders in Starfall City's districts. "Lord," a scout rode up as the column marched, armor damp with morning dew. "Urgent report from High Hermitage. House Brymont is conscripting soldiers, claiming it's to defend against the Red Mountain wildlings." Arthur's lips curved faintly. A cold light flashed in his eyes. "Keep watching." Morning lit the Mountain Legion station as they drew near. Built beside a quarry and iron mine, the station had plenty of stone to work with and had been steadily expanded over 2 years around the training grounds. It now sat like a pass between Violet Canyon and the Red Mountains, stone towers rising, crossbow bastions stepping up the slope where they met the walls of Ironstone's stronghold. Sir Bard, Gerald, and others were already at the gate to meet Arthur as he rode in. "What are the chieftains doing?" Arthur asked as he dismounted, his boots crunching on gravel. "Over the last few days, 6 chieftains have sent their heirs, and a few hundred scattered free folk have come to pledge," Sir Bard answered. His face, usually set for war, showed a trace of relief. "I feared spies among them, so I kept them in a labor camp by Ironstone's stronghold under Shi-Gu's watch." Arthur frowned. "There were 15 tribes in the Red Mountains, weren't there?" "Only 9 now," Sir Bard said. "The Stone Sheep and Stone Bear tribes have joined us. 4 other tribes suffered heavy losses. Their lands were either taken by upstream torrent tribes or they've merged with others." They passed through the station and climbed to the meeting room in the main stone tower. Arthur took the head seat and looked down at the unfolded map of the Red Mountains on the table, where each tribe and its sphere of influence were marked. 3 points were circled in red. "So, only 2 tribes are openly rebelling with the Vulture tribe?" Arthur asked. "On the face of it, yes," Jimmy put in. "Maybe they're afraid of your reputation as the Sword of the Morning." Xiongdi nodded. "We free folk respect strength. It's how we survive up there. My father moved our clansmen into Violet Canyon, despite everyone objecting, swore fealty, and integrated into life here. Seeing Starfall City's rise, others have done the same." Arthur had expected some of this after the near-complete integration of the Stonebear tribe, but he hadn't thought the resistance would be so weak. Fewer than half the tribes were openly defiant. Then again, it made sense. His earlier agreement with the wildlings had been a slow assimilation, like boiling a frog in warm water. Now the water was hot. When the heat goes up, no matter how much the frog struggles, it won't get out. "Why don't we order the other tribes to attack Qian and let them fight among themselves first?" Jimmy suggested. The commanders brightened at the thought. Arthur had considered the idea, but he shook his head. Those chieftains who pledged to Qian and also send their heirs here aren't fools. They want to sit on the fence and watch who wins. "If I force them to attack Qian," he continued, "I risk pushing them firmly to his side, and if Qian thinks they're still loyal to him, he won't dare act against them for fear they'll swing to us." Everyone understood. Jimmy clicked his tongue. So many moves and counter-moves. Arthur turned to Sir Bard. "How many men does Qian have now?" "From the free folk who came to us," Sir Bard replied. "Qian, Vulture King's son, has over 600 combatants from 3 tribes. Upstream, the wildlings are said to be under Kara of the Mountain Shadow tribe. He's supposed to command over 1,000. Hearing Qian had only 600 made Arthur privately feel less worried. He remembered the Vulture King once fielding over 5,000 wildlings and the hard-fought victory they had won against him. Kara of the Mountain Shadow tribe. Why does that name ring a bell? Jimmy grinned. He was the champion of the group martial contest. He took 7,000 gold dragons from us. Gerald pushed open the door at that moment and heard the remark. "Then we must find out where he stashed those gold dragons before we cut off his head," he said, half joking. With the main commanders present, they divided the responsibilities and finalized a plan. Strike straight at the Vulture tribe's stronghold. The plan: leave 150 archers under Sir Bard to garrison the Mountain Legion station. Gerald would take 700 armored infantry. Jimmy would command 200 archers. Arthur would lead over 170 Mountain Legion elite troops himself. Arthur preferred commanding smaller elite units. Too many men in the Red Mountains only complicated operations. The objective was simple: press into the Vulture tribe's heartland. If Qian abandoned his lands and fled, his fragile prestige would be gone. If he stood and fought, the Red Mountain wildlings would see what the Sword of the Morning and the Southern barbarian invasion truly meant. Chapter 164, Battle of Red Mountains. Morning mist clung to the Red Mountains as the army pushed along the narrow, rocky paths. The Mountain Legion, bred and trained in these ranges, moved as if on a plane. Even laden with supplies, they kept a brisk, steady pace. The rest of the force wasn't as practiced, but the threat of the southern barbarian raids had hardened everyone's marches. None of them lagged far behind. "Lord, enemy scouts ahead!" A runner panted as he arrived. Arthur raised a hand to signal the column onward and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his sight linked with Sharpwing high above. Through the hawk's keen eyes, he picked out a dozen shadowy figures lying in ambush atop a ridge. "Jimmy," Arthur said without turning. 10 o'clock, behind the ridge. Mounted archery. Get a volley ready." Jimmy, captain of the archers, nodded and barked orders. The 40 sharpshooters Arthur had personally trained knocked arrows and tightened bowstrings in a heartbeat. A series of twangs split the morning, and several cries rose from the ridge as the ambushers fled their hides. "Xiangdi, take your men and finish them. Don't let any escape." Xiangdi returned soon after, blood on his sleeve. "All dealt with," he reported. Skirmishes like this had become common on the march. The wildlings favored hit-and-run harassment, but Sharpwing's reconnaissance, the Mountain Legion's agility, and the Starfall City Army's superior armor and discipline made those tactics futile. By the second day, the scouts and ambush parties had all but disappeared. Arthur led the column past several neutral tribal settlements on purpose, showing force. 1,000 disciplined troops moving swiftly through the mountains made an impression. The tribal chiefs soon offered food and welcome where once they might have withheld it. "The Vulture tribe's lands are up ahead," Xiongdi said, nodding toward a high spur of rock. Arthur linked with Sharpwing again and took in the sight from above. The Vulture tribe's village sat on a plateau: orchards, terraced fields, pens for goats, and mountain ponies. But the camp itself was strangely quiet. Only a few elders and children moved among the huts. On the nearby ridges, almost 2,000 warriors had massed, arrayed in 2 camps, nearly all concealed along the forested crest. Either Qian, the Vulture King's son, or Kara of the Mountain Shadow had not been reckless. They knew this fight would come, and they had gathered to make the most of it. A victory here could crown a new Vulture leader. Arthur felt the advantage lay with him, but no victory was guaranteed. He heightened his guard and gave the order. "All troops, halt, form up, prepare for engagement." The army fell into ranks. The wildling horns answered with a sudden, ragged war wail, and 3 loose vanguard columns surged forward, trying to catch the Starfall line before it could tighten. Faces and bodies were painted with fierce war markings. Crude spears and axes flashed as they ran. The ground where they met sloped gently and was strewn with boulders. The Starfall forces held fast. Gerald Dane's infantry fell into layered shield walls. Iron plates locked edge to edge like a bronze bulwark. 200 archers huddled at the center of the formation, their shields braced. Arthur posted the Mountain Legion on the archers' flank, Zack raising the meteor banner beside him. "Shoot in staggered volleys," Jimmy ordered. "First echelon, loose arrows." Jimmy split the archers into 3 echelons. The first, composed of sharpshooters, had the longest range. The following ranks provided continuous pressure. Arrows screamed and fell like rain into the charging wildling ranks. Wooden shields splintered. Unarmored warriors dropped. The wildlings answered with dense volleys of short spears. Most were stopped by the shields, but many shields became enmeshed with spearheads. Some infantrymen had to drop theirs and fight bare-armed. When the wildling vanguard reached the front line, the clash became a grinding, chaotic melee. These were not conscripts. The Starfall shields and spear forms were manned by seasoned guards and mercenaries. A wildling who broke through one shield wall would find another waiting. Gerald Dane moved behind the lines, reorganizing and throwing fresh men into any breach. Then the wildling rear surged forward. With the front locked, the archers could only lob high-arching shots. Their lethality dropped against the newly committed rear. Xiongdi called out over the din. The vanguards, the Vulture clan under Qian, the rear's tribes from the upper Ruiliu. Arthur's violet eyes narrowed. The enemy had committed its reserves. Their flank would be exposed if struck quickly. Archers, shift to the left flank. Mountain Legion, with me. 170 Mountain Legion elites answered. They had no war horses, but their speed in rugged ground was unmatched. When Arthur lifted the Dawn longsword and led the charge, the legion struck like a honed blade into the wildling's right flank. The purple battle flag that flew above them drew the enemy commander's eye, and he scrambled troops to plug the breach. Arthur, blades flashing, cut through them. Wielding twin swords, the heavy, glittering Dawn greatsword and the swift azure blade at his side, he opened the gap with a roaring assault. Each swing of the greatsword rent armor and flesh. The azure blade found throats and gaps with lightning precision. Once the Mountain Legion bit into the flank, the whole fight began to resolve. The wildling lines frayed and folded. Gerald's infantry held immovable in front. Jimmy probed for firing lanes and then severed retreating pockets with deadly volleys. The Mountain Legion's momentum turned the battle into rout. By noon, the wildling resistance collapsed. Qian and Kara tried to pull a fighting retreat, but Arthur anticipated it and sent his men to cut off their escape. When the Dawn longsword pressed at Qian's neck, the Vulture King's son sank to his knees, face drained of color. Chapter 165, Hoe or Longsword. The setting sun poured its last light over the battlefield, painting the stone forest a dazzling scarlet. Arthur stood on a raised rock, his whole body feeling soaked in clotted blood. He loosened the vine straps of his armor and, with Zach's help, peeled off the protective gear. Clean water from his waterskin washed the blood from his face and pooled dark and red on the stone slab. "My father treated you like his own son. We grew up together." Xiongdi's voice came from nearby, raw with fury. "He accepted your invitation without even bringing guards. Why did you kill him?" Arthur turned. Xiongdi had grabbed Qian by the collar. The Vulture King's son, bound in iron chains, hung his head. Ragged black hair fell over his eyes. "Believe it or not," Qian said hoarsely, his voice strangely calm, "I did not mean to kill him." He slowly raised his head, revealing bloodshot eyes. "But he did die because of me." "Who killed my father?" Xiongdi demanded, his knuckles white on the cloth. Qian only repeated, "He died because of me." At that moment, Mountain Legion soldiers dragged another man forward. "I killed him, Kara, of the Mountain Shadow tribe." The thin man laughed, yellow crooked teeth flashing. "I shoved a dagger into the old man's neck. I chopped off his head and sent it to the tribes." His laughter was cut short when the escorting soldier punched him hard in the face, sending him reeling. Gerald Dane came up tiredly, his purple cloak spattered with blood. He took a long sip of unsweetened lemonade, the sourness waking him. "Kara," he said, "where did you hide the 7,000 gold dragons? Maybe that sum could buy your life." "That proves nothing," Kara spat blood. "Kill me and you won't get a single coin." Gerald laughed and tossed his waterskin to a servant. "Then you can save it for the 7 hells." A Mountain Legion captain strode forward, armor ringing with each step. "My lord," he said in the Legion's crisp salute, "we've confirmed it. All surviving wildling leaders are present." Arthur gave a slight nod, eyes sweeping over the 7 captured tribal chiefs. According to the captain, only one had followed Qian. The other 6 had been brought by Kara from the north. "Begin the trial," Arthur ordered. The soldiers understood and hauled Kara up. "Kara." Arthur looked him squarely in the eye. "I had been willing to recruit you. Your victory in the free-for-all shows skill." He paused, a trace of regret in his voice. "With your talent and status, if you had been loyal enough, I might have made you governor of the wildlings." "Loyalty?" Kara forced a twisted smile, blood leaking from his split lips. "Free folk do not bow to the people of the Green Lands." Arthur admired, in a private sort of way, men who stood their ground to the end, but he also knew that unbending things often snapped. He waved, weary. "Xiongdi, since you seek vengeance for your father, I leave him to you." "Thank you, Lord." Xiongdi's voice trembled with the edge of excitement. He seized Kara by the hair and dragged him toward the darkening woods. Kara's curses dwindling into the dusk. Arthur turned to Chion. Despite his shackles, the Vulture King's son held himself with the dignity of a leader. Your father, the Vulture King, was a warrior, Arthur said, his voice cutting through the twilight. He caused Starfall City and me a great deal of trouble, but he died on a spear. He stepped closer. You are not your father, though you bear some of his bearing. As a courtesy, you will be executed at dawn. Chion nodded with an odd calm and was led away. Next came the 7 wildling leaders. Arthur addressed them plainly. You led your people in an invasion of Starfall territory. All of you will be hanged. There are 7 of you, so you can swing together. 3 of the men immediately dropped to their knees, heads to the ground. Lord Sword of the Morning, Kara misled us, one cried. I will submit to you, my lord. Have mercy. The other 4 stood coldly, their faces hard and hateful. The captain hesitated. My lord, there is no gallows here that will hold 7. Arthur's gaze landed on a crooked tree by the camp entrance. Hang them from that tree. When the other tribal leaders arrive, let them see first, then bring them into the tent. They tried. 1 tree was not enough for 7 men. When the 6th was up, the trunk groaned and split with a sound like a thunderclap. The soldiers had to string each man up from 7 separate trees. News of the battle spread like wildfire across the Red Mountains. By the next afternoon, the remaining 6 leaders of the Red Mountain tribes had been summoned to the Vulture tribe's camp. In the former Vulture King's great tent, Sharpwing, once the dead king's war vulture, sat again on its wooden perch, proud and watchful. The tribal chiefs stood trembling and dared not meet Arthur's eyes at the head of the tent. They feared not only the 7 men hanging outside and the enormous vulture, but the force Arthur had displayed in the Red Mountains, the annihilation of the Vulture tribe and the Northern Coalition. You did not take part in the rebellion, and you followed orders to send hostages, Arthur said, his voice echoing in the tent. That pleases me. Then, as if shifting to a new thought, he produced the Alliance Pact, smeared with bloodied fingerprints. But you concealed information and signed an alliance with the rebels. That displeases me. Panic swept through the leaders. They all began to speak at once, scrambling for excuses. Lord Sword of the Morning, I did not know of Chion's ambition. Circumstances forced my hand. Xiongdi, he was killed because he would not leave his mark. No, he was mad. Xiongdi watched him grow up. Cooperating with the northern tribes was like inviting wolves into the house. One older leader sobbed openly, snot and tears streaking his face, showing no trace of the iron resolve the free folk were famed for. Arthur thought the hardest men had either died in the wars or been recruited into the Mountain Legion. Enough, Arthur roared, and the tent fell silent. He tossed the Alliance Pact into the fire pit. The parchment curled, blackened, and turned to ash. Words are wind, he said. I need you to prove your loyalty with deeds. Watching the contract burn, the leaders felt some relief. Their lives, for now, were spared. How shall we prove it? One asked cautiously. Arthur rose. He looked at each of them, his voice even and final. A hoe or a longsword? Chapter 166, Attack of Blackmon. The torrent river crashed against the rocks on both banks, its rapids roaring like a living thing. North of High Hermitage, along the border of House Bremont's lands, tents flew banners bearing a vulture clutching a babe. In the central pavilion, Erwin Brymont pressed his trembling fingers to his temples. His face was pale and speckled with sweat. Rosso Buren! Erwin slammed his fist onto the table so hard he winced from a stabbing pain in the back of his head and had to grab the table's edge to steady himself. He stared at the disheveled Sir Carlo before him, once an arrogant commander, now barefoot and caked in mud, looking more like a refugee than a knight. You were routed by a greenhorn freerider? He isn't even a knight! Since Sir Arthur Snow's lance had struck the gorget and thrown him from his horse at the Sunspear tourney, a dull, iron nail-like pain had been driven into the back of Erwin's head. The ache throbbed without mercy. Even the lightest touch sent a bolt of pain through him, forcing him to sleep on his stomach. The Meister had called his waking a miracle and warned that too much excitement would only make the headaches worse. But rage overrode the pain. Sir Carlo hunched his shoulders and answered in a thin, treacherous voice. My lord, Rosso Buren's force was almost entirely cuirassiers, well-equipped, moving like the wind. They numbered at least 500. 100? 500 cavalry? A knight laughed and slammed his cup down. Carlo, were you counting their numbers while you were running? Carlo's face reddened. He swallowed and tried to pull back his words. They kicked up so much dust the sky looked covered. Their momentum, even if not 500, at least 300. His voice thinned to a whisper. Get out and take charge of the supply train. Erwin ground out through clenched teeth. Make sure every last provision destined for Bremont arrives on time. He shut his eyes and drew a deep, steadying breath. He could not bear Carlo's terrified round face any longer. Once the man slunk from the tent, Erwin and his captains returned to talk of training levies and organizing supplies. Outside, the torrent's thunder mixed with the shouts of men drilling, a grim rhythm under their plans. They had been debating how to handle Rosso Buren when a messenger burst in, grinning wildly as he yanked back the flap. My lord, Chion of the Red Mountains sends word. He ambushed Sir Arthur Snow in Vulture Tribe lands and routed the 1,000 men the Sword of the Morning brought. They advanced carelessly and were crushed. The tent erupted. What? Impossible. The Sword of the Morning? The Sword of the Morning is still a man. Men can fail. Wasn't the previous Sword of the Morning killed by Ed Stark? A grizzled serf frowned. This sounds off. I heard Snow's force was all Starfall's elites. Elites bleed like anyone else, another spat. Cut their throats and they'll die. Erwin's hand shook with excitement as he took the reply from Chion. The letter detailed an ambush laid with clever use of the terrain, how Snow's 1,000 had been thrown into confusion and slaughtered. The more he read, the more convinced he became. Chion says he's used the prestige of defeating the Sword of the Morning to unite the wildlings of the Red Mountains, Erwin announced, his voice rising. But he lacked provisions and couldn't finish Snow. The wounded Snow escaped with 100 men. Chion can't besiege cities, so he proposes we join forces and move downstream to take Starfall City directly. As the letter passed hand to hand, another scout dashed in. Lord, for some reason, the Starfall forces confronting us broke camp and withdrew. Erwin sprang up, and in that instant, the relentless pain that had tormented him for days eased as if a veil had been lifted. Truly, the pupil has surpassed the master, he cried, slamming his palm on the table with such force a cup of wine tipped over. The deep red spilled across the map like blood. An older, cautious knight flushed and could not hide his enthusiasm. Lord, with the Sword of the Morning defeated and Starfall's elites shattered, this is a gift from the gods. We must strike while the iron is hot. Everyone in the tent wanted a part of the advance. This time House Brymont will not miss the chance to claim the torrent, Erwin said, watching their eager faces. His eyes gleamed with ambition. Sound the order. Break camp and march. Tell Khan, no, tell our new Vulture King, to gather every mobilizable man and meet me below High Hermitage. We will supply them with provisions. Once it's done, he added, we'll divide Starfall's lands, the torrent as the border. Over the next days, everything seemed to turn in Erwin's favor. Not only did the headache ebb, but fortune smiled on them. Word of Snow's defeat had spread through the camp. The men marched with renewed vigor. The Starfall army's hasty retreat left behind a wealth of supplies in their abandoned camp, which set the soldiers to cheering. Erwin, eager to keep what they took orderly and to present themselves as a legitimate power, strictly forbade pillage. Villages and taverns were soon to be Brymont assets. There was one perennial thorn, Rosso Buren's cavalry, skirmishing like flies to harass and slow the column. Their constant shadowing frayed nerves. Erwin solved it with a trap. He used a supply convoy as bait, laying an ambush to catch the raiders. The ambush was a success. The cavalry commander who led the strike reported back. Their real numbers were around 100, far less than Carlo cried out. Their fighting was fierce, though. Even after we sprang the ambush, many broke through and escaped. Still, we left 20 behind. Erwin felt a surge of satisfaction. Even Carlo's round, terrified face could not sour his mood now. Standing on the rise above the torrent, watching the water surge and foam, he felt the Brymont army like a coiling current, ready from the headwaters to the mouth to crash down and carry everything before it. The morning mist hugged High Hermitage as 7 knights emerged like ghosts from the fog, the Vulture King banner of House Brymont snapping in the cool wind. They halted a bowshot from the walls. "Lord, do you think they'll surrender the city?" a knight beside Erwin asked, nervously rubbing the hilt of his sword. He glanced up at High Hermitage's looming walls. His Adam's apple bobbed. "This place, high walls, thick defenses, plenty of men, won't be easy to take," the knight went on. "If we can talk them into yielding, that's best," Erwin said, looking over the knights behind him with a fox-like light in his eyes. "If not, we offer terms so they don't fight to the death. Taking a keep isn't only about ladders and rams." "Aye," a standard-bearer agreed with exaggerated deference, one hand on the banner. Everyone remembers when Lord Chubbyfish besieged Storm's End for a year during Robert's rebellion. He didn't take the castle, but he did get fatter. The men's laughter grew rowdy as they traded barbs about the reach. They derided boastful airs and mocked attempts at bravery. Randall Tarley's son, who'd needed 2 sorcerers from Karth to beef him up, the tales of bathing in a bull's blood, the jests about dragon blood. Humiliating Reachmen had long been a pastime on the Dorne marches. The tent rang with wine-scented mirth until Erwin cleared his throat. The laughter died instantly. The side gate of High Hermitage groaned open, and 7 knights rode out, bearing the long spear shooting star banner. Their steeds came to a stop a short distance away. The standard-bearers exchanged names, and Sir William called out in a loud, official voice. "Sir Erwin, withdraw your men from Starfall City's lands at once. For the sake of Dorne, swear to obey the commands of the Guardian of the Torrent River from now on, and Starfall will overlook your aggression." Erwin laughed, seeing straight through the bluster. The sword of the morning was broken in the Red Mountains. "Starfall's best are gone. Those conscripted peasants of yours ran like rabbits. If they hadn't, we'd have routed you already. Empty titles can't defend a keep." Sir William's face drained. "Then what do you want?" "Surrender. Kneel to House Brymont, send hostages, and swear fealty. In return, on behalf of Countess Laura, I'll let you keep 2/3 of your lands and your castles." Erwin's tone was arrogant, certain. "We need time," Sir William said soberly. "We'll answer in 3 days." Erwin nodded. 3 days it is." On the march back to camp, a knight suspected it was a delaying tactic. Erwin smiled confidently. "We still have to finish our siege engines and wait for the Vulture King and his army to arrive. It's not wise to fight Starfall to the death now. If we overcommit and take heavy losses, we won't have the strength to keep the wildlings in check when they come." "And if the wildlings get there first?" the knight asked. "They're poor at sieges," Erwin said. "They'll boost our numbers and pressure High Hermitage. Who will the lords trust more, the wildlings or a fellow Dornish lord? Surrender to us, and you keep your castles." Adulation lit the knight's face. "Lord Erwin is brilliant." 2 days of fevered preparation passed. Viscount Dimitri of High Hermitage sent wine and meat more than once, clearly a peace offering. Erwin took it as a good sign. "Once Qian arrives with his army, we'll set ladders to the walls, put on a show, and give them an easy way out," he said to his men. They drank and mocked Arthur Snow, the Sword of the Morning, young, talented in tournaments, but, they decided, inexperienced in true war. A scout burst in, leading a wildling dressed in furs. "Lord, the Vulture King has reached the west bank of the torrent and is crossing. This is Mandy, an envoy from the Stone Barbarian tribe." "How many men?" Erwin demanded, impatient. Mandy accepted a cup of amber peach wine from Erwin's attendant and downed it in one swallow. "The Vulture King gathered the Red Mountains forces, over 2,000 warriors," he said. He wiped his lips. "We were delayed. The Vulture King stopped at the tomb of the previous king to pay respects and pray for victory." "A filial thing," Erwin murmured, then ordered preparations. "You'll flank and cheer our men." Mandy hesitated. "Lord, will you not meet the Vulture King first?" Erwin straightened, spreading his battle cloak with confident authority. "Tell him, we'll meet in High Hermitage. Make ready. Assemble the army. Attack!" Erwin's commanders barked. The Brymont troops, disciplined after years on the marches, fell into line. Soldiers pushed the battering rams and set the ladders. A trickle of weak arrows came from the keep above. Only a few men were hit. The Brymont storm pressed forward, and just as they pushed the ram to the gate, the great doors creaked wide. The commander in the lead grinned and called, "As I said, mere theater." He was about to complain at the lack of a real fight when his words cut off. Hundreds of knights stood within the open gate, their mail and plate flashing in the dawn. Then a horn blared and hooves thundered. Like an iron tide, they surged out. "Long live Starfall," they cried. "Long live the Sword of the Morning!" Led by Rosso Buren, the knights smashed into the unprepared Brymont vanguard. The neatly ordered siege force ruptured like paper. From the walls, archers and stone throwers stopped pretending. They rained death on the exposed attackers. The Brymont army crumbled into chaos. Erwin's face tightened. A hot spike of pain throbbed at the base of his skull, but he kept his voice steady. "Have the wildling force organize at once and rush the city through the open gate. Kate. Cavalry, intercept that knight unit. Don't let that free rider escape again. I want victory in one blow." Orders flew. The Brymont cavalry commander led his men out to cut down the fleeing knight unit weaving through the field. To the right, the wildling contingent, supposed to be a flank guard, charged. But not at the city. They surged into the Brymont lines. If any of the Brymont officers had suspected treachery, they had shown no sign. The wildlings turned on them with ferocity. Confusion spread like plague. Men who had been cheering from the flank now hacked and stabbed their supposed allies. The well-trained Brymont soldiers found themselves unprepared for an assault from both front and flank. "The wildlings," someone shouted. "They've allied with Starfall." Even then, Erwin's mind raced. He barked, "Organize the retreat, fall back to camp, build defenses, gather the routed men, I'll lead the reserves to hold them and buy time." A gray-faced sergeant drew his sword and spurred forward, a sad smile cutting his face as he led the reserve unit toward the broken right flank. His attendant followed with the standard, but more and more soldiers poured from the keep, and the Brymont force fell apart in brutal, grinding street fighting. Erwin's vision swam. The numbers flowed wrong. More horsemen, more infantry. High Hermitage's sortie had been a trap. He felt the world tilt. "Sound the horn, full retreat to camp," he ordered hoarsely. The horn called the broken army back. Erwin's legs gave as he swung for his horse. An attendant hauled him up. "Damn the wildlings," he spat. "What did Starfall promise you? Is half the land not enough?" They fled under the shouts and triumph of High Hermitage. Rosso Buren wanted to lead a victorious pursuit, but Gerald Dane's horn stopped him. Dane, pulling off his own armor, sipped unsweetened lemonade as he explained in a calm voice that chilled Erwin where he sat. This was Arthur's command. Brymont and Starfall are both Dornish. Needless slaughter among Dorne is not wise. He nodded toward the fleeing column. "We will not squander men on slaughter. Gather scattered prisoners, bring them in. As for Arthur, he said he will meet us in Brymont." Erwin gathered his dispersed men in the camp and counted them. Fewer than 1,000 remained. He feared Starfall's pursuit and dared not linger. Limping with a fierce headache, he ordered only dry rations taken. They marched through the night toward Vermont. Rosso Buren's light riders harried them along the way, and a 4.5-day trek was cut to 3. Men fell away with every forced march. When they reached Brymont's walls, only 200-odd soldiers were left, many without armor, some limping, others crying with relief. "We're back," someone whispered as the familiar silhouette of the castle rose up. Erwin looked at the battered handful who remained, at the empty space where the strong force he'd expected should have been, and remembered his bold promises before High Hermitage, his vow to his cousin. Something in him let go. His legs failed. The world darkened. He slid from his horse and crumpled to the ground. Twilight, red as blood, painted the towering walls of Brymont City a deep crimson. "My lord, just a little further. Once we're inside, it will be safe," Queet said, hastily and deftly supporting the tottering Erwin Bremont. Erwin dismounted with difficulty, leaning on his attendant. His lips were cracked and pale, his breath shallow. "Queet," his voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you for your service. You are an excellent, brave attendant." His eyelids felt like lead. 3 days of forced marching had drained the last of his strength, and the dull, growing pain at the base of his skull made every step an effort. The heavy hinges of the city gate screeched. Hoofbeats thundered closer. "My lord, what's happened to you?" The voice was all too familiar. Sir Carlo, the knight Erwin had publicly humiliated and reduced to the supply train. Erwin tried to open his eyes to see him, but made out only a blurred silhouette. "We lost. Starfall City's pursuers are still behind us," Queet replied, his voice raw with wariness and despair. Quick, get the lord into the city and close the gate. By the gods, Carlo shouted as he dismounted, armor clanking. Everyone, hurry! Inside the city, it'll be safe. Another arm took Erwin's weight. Through watery vision, he made out Carlo's broad face. It had always been one that annoyed him, but now it seemed oddly steady and comforting. Carlo, Erwin forced the words out, his voice hoarse and unfamiliar. I misjudged you. That Rosso Brun, he truly is brave leading cavalry. Carlo frowned. My lord, not now. Rest. Tend to your health. Erwin was stunned. After all he had done to humiliate Carlo, the man still cared for him. True loyalty, he thought bitterly. If the Bremont family could recover from this ruin, Erwin swore he would knight Queet and make Carlo captain of the guard. Fewer than 200 exhausted soldiers, faces streaked with dust, shuffled through the inner city gate. The heavy portcullis fell with a dull thud behind them. As they crossed the inner square, Queet halted. Erwin lifted his head, realizing they were headed not to his private chambers, but to the castle keep. Carlo never faltered. We must go first to the audience hall. Countess Laura waits for news. Erwin frowned. I should change my clothes. He reeked of sweat and horse. 3 days of forced march had turned his garments into a stained rag, a bloodied cloak hanging from one shoulder. Carlo shook his head. That won't be necessary. Countess Laura won't mind how you look. The words stabbed him. No change of clothes, no display of outward dignity could hide the fact that 3,500 Bremont soldiers had been lost. A sharp, hot pain lanced through the back of his head. The world tilted. They stopped before the massive oak doors of the audience hall, carved with the Bremont crest. Carlo nodded. The great doors groaned open. A voice cried out in shock. Who is this? How can he sit in the Lord's chair? Queet's voice rose, incredulous. Countess Laura, why did you let him take your seat? Erwin forced his lids apart. On the high dais, in the Lord's chair, a figure sat both familiar and transformed. The young man Erwin had once derided as a bastard, the man now called the Sword of the Morning. Arthur regarded him with an unruffled calm. We meet again, Sir Erwin, Arthur said. You arrived sooner than I expected. Erwin's mind flashed back to the first taunting letter Snow had sent, the line about having already killed one invading vulture tribe and not minding a second. Now Arthur occupied his seat like a question answered. A surge of stubborn pride pushed Erwin to wrench himself free of his supporters. He straightened, trying to appear less broken, and fixed his gaze on Arthur. Why are you here, Snow? He demanded. Arthur ignored him and turned to Countess Laura Bremont, who sat below. Lady Laura, he said gently but firmly, please order the soldiers who entered the city to lay down their arms. Do not offer any more pointless resistance and sacrifices. Laura rose and made a formal curtsy. As you wish, my lord. We are grateful for your mercy. As she passed Erwin, her lips curved in a bitter, helpless smile. Erwin, we have lost. We are utterly defeated. She left with 2 guards, and the heavy doors thundered shut behind her like a death knell for the Bremont name. Erwin's face went pale. He repeated, voice quavering, Why are you here, Snow? Sir Carlo, explain to him, Arthur instructed. Carlo bowed with practiced grace. When he faced Erwin, the humility vanished, replaced by a cold, indifferent expression. When we were escorting the supply train, my lord's army intercepted us. Then Lord Arthur came, his men disguised as a returning supply convoy. We took advantage of the depleted garrison, seized the gate, and now control the castle. Hatred flared in Erwin's eyes. You chameleon! Carlo smiled without shame. Erwin, tell me, if someone offered you the acting lordship of Bremont City and marriage to Countess Laura in exchange for your loyalty, what would you choose? Erwin had no answer. He turned his gaze back to Arthur. And what of Chion and the wildling tribes of the Red Mountains? What did you bribe them with? Bribe Chion, Arthur shrugged. I sent him to join his father. I do not tolerate insubordination. He went on, measured and confident. After I destroyed the Vulture tribe, the mountain tribes submitted. They no longer answer to anyone but me. Soon I will be the guardian of the Torrent River. Destroyed the Vulture tribe. The words struck Erwin like a cold hand. Scenes unspooled in his head. The forged letters, Starfall City's sudden retreat, Rosso Brun's harassment ending in ambush, Viscount High Hermitage's flattering gifts, the envoy's excuse about mourning his father. Each piece snapped into place. He, Erwin Bremont, had marched into the trap. He thought of the arrogance with which he had once dismissed Arthur, treating war like a contest of skill. The irony burned. Arthur's maneuvers had not been naive. They were calculated cruelty and clever theater. "I could have defeated you outright," Arthur said softly as if reading his thought. "But I staged things to minimize bloodshed on both sides. Those soldiers who survived will answer Starfall City's call and serve under my command." "Serve under your command." The words hammered into the back of Erwin's skull. He remembered ordering his army not to plunder High Hermitage, naively thinking those lands would be Brymont's spoils. The headache exploded into a white-hot pain, as if his skull were being cleaved. The room tilted. Faces swam before his eyes. Carlo's mocking grin, Queet's stunned dismay, Arthur's serene composure, and above them all the Brymont crest, a legacy of 1,000 years, seeming now to watch coldly as all he had was taken. The world collapsed inward, and darkness claimed him. Chapter 169, Funeral. Lord, he's dead. Carlo shoved Queet aside and knelt, pressing 2 fingers to Erwin's neck for a moment before looking up. When Erwin had gone down, Arthur had expected a faint from the shock. He hadn't expected death. "A man's life is like a lamp put out," Arthur said, waving a hand with mild resignation. "Inform Lady Lola and bury him according to his family's rights." Queet rubbed his eyes and sighed. "My lord, the Brymont family has no crypt. They perform sky burials. Their dead are offered to the crows and vultures on the Red Mountains. Then handle it by their custom." Arthur accepted Queet's loyalty with a slow nod. On the training ground, the 200 exhausted Bremont soldiers who had entered the city under Lola's command, watched from the walls by the Mountain Legion, had all surrendered. The months-long conflict that began with the Vulture Tribe's rebellion had ended in Starfall City's decisive victory. Arthur honored the Bremont custom. Erwin's body was sent back to the Red Mountains to be consumed by the birds. And Arthur kept his promise. He arranged the marriage between Sir Carlo and Lady Lola, making Carlo acting city lord of Bremont City. Carlo hastened to formalize the marriage and oversaw the wedding feast. Bremont City, which had worn a hush of mourning, was soon decked with lanterns and ribbons. With Arthur's backing, the wedding was staged with deliberate splendor, a bright mask over the city's fresh wounds. From the high terrace of the castle, Arthur watched the courtyard bustle. Servants passing like shuttles with wine and food, musicians tuning, a melody drifting in the early spring air. Even the soldiers who had been at each other's throats not long before sat at long tables together, clinking cups and laughing, as if the blood that had been shed were already a distant memory. "Lord, your kindness is something I can never repay," Carlo said from behind, his smile oily as he knelt as if to kiss Arthur's boots. Today the groom wore a new dark blue velvet suit, the Bremont falcon pinned to his chest. "Bremont City needs a ruler who knows his place," Arthur said, offering a hand to help him up. "Remember how you came by this position, Carlo?" Carlo nodded so hard sweat purled on his brow. "My lord, I swear it. Everything I am is granted by you. Starfall City's will is my will." Arthur patted his shoulder and felt satisfied. He had treated Carlo generously, partly because of his promise, and partly because Carlo's situation mirrored what Arthur had done earlier with Shi-Gu of the Stone Sheep tribe. Placing Carlo atop Bremont in exchange for his betrayal bound Carlo to Starfall City. His position depended on loyal service. Arthur had also taken Lady Lola's eldest children, Jonisa and her younger brother Penrose, as attendants. Under Dorne's gender-equal inheritance laws, Jonisa was the rightful heir to Bremont, and keeping her close both checked Carlo and restrained the family. If Carlo grew too ambitious, Arthur could back Jonisa. If the Bremonts rebelled, they would have to weigh the fate of their own heirs. Power required double insurance. The banquet went late into the night. Amidst clinking cups, Arthur announced rewards for his officers. Rosso Brun, the free rider whose cavalry had distinguished itself, received the grandest prize. Arthur personally dubbed him knight and granted him a fertile manor cut from Brymont lands. "A toast to Ser Rosso Brun," Arthur called, raising his silver cup so it caught the candlelight. "A toast to Lord Arthur," the hall thundered. Rosso knelt to receive his title, his scarred face alight with gratitude. Gerald Dane, Jimmy, Xiangdi, and Guy and others stepped forward in turn, each receiving honors and lands fitting their service. Arthur stayed in Braemont City for a week afterward, overseeing countless details, redeeming captives and tallying ransoms, exchanging fiefs for vassals, drawing boundary lines, apportioning spoils. He reviewed every matter personally, burning through candles late into the night until his eyes ached. The paperwork and ceremonies of peace were, Arthur thought, sometimes more exhausting than war itself, but they could not be entrusted to others. How a lord handled these issues forged loyalty or sowed future grievances. When he finally finished and smoothed the last parchment, he felt a quiet satisfaction. More than that, after tallying his forces, he was surprised. His direct command had swelled toward 10,000. After pacifying the wildling tribes in the Red Mountains and absorbing allied tribal contingents, plus the wildlings taken in the Vulture tribe campaign, he had over 2,000 men. The Braemont surrender, the High Hermitage battle, and the pursuit of scattered groups along the way added another 2,500, most of whom the Braemonts later redeemed. With Starfall City's original garrison and time for the wounded to recover and captives to be subdued, the guardian of the Endstream River could, if he wished, muster an army of 10,000. As the rewarded vassals returned and the city's routines resumed, Arthur stood in Braemont's main hall discussing the road from Shingy Fort to Prince's Pass with Sir William. "Sir, a lady wishes to see you," announced his new attendant, Penrose Braemont. 8 years old and Lola's only son, Penrose had always been favored by his mother and was a shy, trembling child. "A lady?" Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Show her in." Before the woman entered, a bright, familiar voice called out, "Arthur, you've really done something big." Miss Nymeria strode in. She wore the same light gauze dress Arthur remembered, and her straight black hair hung in a long plait tied with red and gold cords. Her bearing remained heroic, her figure more mature than before. "Nymeria, why are you here?" Arthur asked, surprised. She didn't answer immediately, only glanced at Sir William and Penrose. Sir William understood the cue, rose, and folded the roadmap away. "My lord will proceed as discussed, construction beginning from both ends." Arthur nodded. "I'll have Karen and Quentin liaise with you later to keep the work moving." When they left, Nymeria took a seat opposite Arthur and casually plucked a peach from the table. She bit into it and watched him. "With such a big disturbance between your two houses, how could Sunspear not notice? My uncle Prince Doran would have heard." "We had little choice," Arthur said. "The Braemont family attacked us without reason. My house, the Dane, was forced to counter to protect our territory. Our main fighting took place outside High Hermitage. There are witnesses." Nymeria gave him a half-smile, her dark eyes saying she already understood him too well. She crossed her legs with an effortless grace and tapped the table. "Uncle sent me to learn the facts. You know Dorne tolerates minor clashes between families, but it won't accept outright annexation between houses the size of the Dane and the Braemonts." "The Dane never intended to annex Braemont," Arthur replied, his expression open. "I'll lead my troops out of Braemont City in a few days. Lady Lola and I will write a full account of events and outcomes, then report to Prince Doran." Nymeria flicked the peach pit into a distant wastebasket with unerring aim and clapped once. "Good. I'm glad you understand." Chapter 170. Arthur. Who to marry? Arthur had finished discussing official business with Nymeria and was about to start another day of affairs. He had been kept under strict watch by her in Braemont City for 3 days. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. But it had also left him a little worse for wear. On the 4th morning, light seeped through the curtains and traced a golden line across the floor. Arthur stood before the mirror, studying his slightly haggard reflection and the dark bags beneath his eyes. He reached up to touch the new stubble on his chin and made a private vow. From this day on, no more drinking. "It's a shame I missed Sword of the Morning's glorious display in the lists." Nymalia's languid voice drifted from the bed behind him. Arthur turned. She lay half-reclined under silk covers, her straight black hair spilling over the pillow. The morning light caught the willowy curve of her body, lending her a peculiar allure. She yawned and smiled, playful. "Then again, over the past few days, I've had a fairly good look at your long spear in bed." Arthur had grown used to Nymalia's audacious remarks and coquettish displays. He kept his face calm. "I meant to crown you Queen of Love and Beauty." It's a pity no one turned up for the tournament. Namelia stretched and the quilt slid, revealing a smooth shoulder. I'd take the Fowler twins over any crown. She lifted herself off the bed, her bare feet padding on the carpet. I heard many ladies from the Reach came. Didn't you find anyone? I was afraid of creating a life, Arthur said with a roll of his eyes. He remembered all too well. Although Namelia hadn't attended, the letter intended to cause trouble had arrived on schedule. Someone brazenly dared his new mistress to a dagger duel. Namelia shrugged off the covers and, like a cat, padded behind him. She leapt up, looping her arms around his neck. Now you're a great lord. How could I still control you? Her chin rested on his shoulder, her breath warm at his ear. Arthur watched her innocent look in the mirror and, knowing her as well as he did, sensed a hint of purpose. Are you asking a favor? Oh, you noticed. She released him, walked to the window and threw the curtains open. Sunlight flooded the room. For a moment, she stood with her back to him. When she spoke, her voice lost its playfulness. It's about Ariane. Ever since my esteemed uncle arranged a match between Ellenwood and the Illyrians, people in Sunspear have been whispering that Quentin should inherit Dorne. My uncle is hiding away in Flowing Water Garden to recuperate. He doesn't hear any of this. You know my father, the Red Viper. He won't be bothered with it. She sighed dramatically. So my cousin Ariane writes to me nearly every day to complain. Arthur could not help another roll of his eyes. He knew how privileged such complaints sounded. What does Ariane want me to do? He asked, suddenly serious. First, let me say I'm not a man to act without reason. Namelia gave him a superior look, lips curling. Always calculating. You do shame the name of Sword of the Morning. Even a Sword of the Morning has to eat, Arthur replied, walking to her side. He let his fingers brush her cheek. She slapped his hand away and grew stern. I'm not teasing. Ariane wants you to ask Prince Doran for a marriage alliance. Arthur blinked. Marry whom? You. He feigned confusion and leaned in. Why are you leaning in? Ouch, stop biting me. Namelia let go of his shoulder, leaving a shallow ring of teeth. I'm serious. It's to marry Ariane. Arthur rubbed his shoulder. Prince Doran won't agree. How can you be so sure? She narrowed her eyes, studying him. Arthur kept his mouth shut. He could not tell Namelia that Doran had already arranged a secret match for Ariane, nor that Doran and the Red Viper were conspiring in ways that would be explosive if revealed. Silence answered her, and she didn't press further. Instead, she moved to the dressing table to comb her long hair. It doesn't matter if Prince Doran agrees or not, she said, almost casually. If you make the request, it's a show of support for Ariane. Arthur thought of the tournament at Starfall, where he had backed Ariane as the Knight of the Heart. The principle was the same. What's in it for me? He asked bluntly. If Doran agrees, you become Prince of Dorne. What more benefit could you ask? Namelia's eyes glittered in the mirror. Arthur gave a noncommittal look. She set down her comb, wound her hair in a golden red tie, and turned to him. Her fingers were restless. I know my uncle's temperament. You are Sword of the Morning. You've put down the Red Mountain Raiders and the Brymont family. He won't lightly refuse a great lord of your standing. Arthur took her hand, feeling her impatience. And if he refuses? He'll offer compensation to win you, she said, pulling her hand free. You don't refuse or affront so important a vassal without something in return. She went on, painting the possible future, Ariane sharing power, advantages, and titles. Only one detail truly moved him, and he was considering how to answer when a sharp knock interrupted them. My lord, the Maester says he has something urgent to discuss, came Penrose's timid voice from the corridor. Arthur frowned. Didn't I tell them not to disturb me these last few days? Maester says he received a letter from Lighthouse Keep, Penrose stammered. The matters in it are very urgent. Arthur sighed. Have the Maester wait for me in the small hall. I'll be there shortly, and prepare 2 breakfasts, one for him in the small hall and one for me here. Penrose's footsteps receded. Namelia raised an eyebrow. Well, what have you decided? Arthur shrugged on his coat, kissed her forehead, and said, You eat. We'll talk when I return. He raised his signet as he left. And don't get any mistaken ideas. I know what you're up to. She glared at the signet, and with a mock show of pique, flung a pillow at him. Arthur dodged. In the small hall, sunlight poured through the tall French doors, illuminating a breakfast of seagull omelet and fried bacon. Arthur sat down, speared a forkful of omelet, and ate. The last few days had been exhausting. He was full and yet famished at the same time. "Maester, what happened at Lighthouse Keep?" he asked, chewing, eyes on the old man who shifted uneasily beside him. The maester hesitated, then handed Arthur the letter he had been holding. "You should read it yourself." Arthur took it. He continued to fork bacon into his mouth with one hand as he unfolded the parchment with the other. As he scanned the lines, his expression hardened. When he reached the last line, he slammed his fork down so hard it clattered on the table and bacon grease splattered onto the letter. "Have Zack ready my horse, and order Rosso Brunn to assemble the cavalry," Arthur said, his voice suddenly as cold as iron. "We leave for Lighthouse Keep at once." The maester startled and bowed quickly. "As you command, my lord." He hurried from the room, leaving Arthur already moving to prepare. Chapter 171. Fire. "What happened?" Nomé asked, confused, as Arthur hurriedly packed his bags. "Have you decided about Ariane's offer?" "I don't have time for air games anymore," Arthur said, finishing packing and changing into a purple riding coat. "If the letter is true, there will be another war." The letter from Lighthouse Keep said a large band of pirates had struck Peach Garden Estate under cover of night, killing the guards, setting most of the orchards ablaze, and destroying the winery. Pete, the acting city lord of Lighthouse Keep Arthur had appointed, had died in the attack. At the word war, Name fell silent. She packed quickly and changed into her golden-red riding leathers. The wine produced at Peach Garden had been an important source of Arthur's income, and its destruction stung, but it was Pete's death that hurt him most. He remembered the first time he'd met Pete, when he'd been bullied by Dumpling Ear on the Storm. Pete had followed him from Bravos to Starfall City, managing his accounts, organizing everything with painstaking care, and never once failing him. After they reached Starfall, Pete supervised the early construction at the still raw Violet Canyon, then went to Lighthouse Keep to manage and develop Peach Garden. Pete even created the Amber Peach wine. Arthur had only ever used the Peach Garden oath card at the very start. Pete had handled nearly everything since, quietly and loyally. He'd never complained, only buried his head in ledgers and written late into the night. "Arthur," Nomé said. She was already ready. "I'm coming with you." Arthur nodded. They rode hard. During a brief halt, Nomé asked, "Did the letter say who did it?" "No." Arthur's hand never left the hilt of Azure Wave as they rode. The blade was cold. The chill from the sword kept his thoughts level, warding off blind anger. Calmly, he said, "I think it was Redwine of Arbor. Earl Paxton has been trying to acquire our Amber Peach wine to control its sale." He let out a long breath, as if expelling the heat in his chest. "After we refused, I expected them to make a move. I never expected them to hire pirates, either that or pretend to be pirates, and launch such a shameless attack." He remembered a joke from his old life. Fake commercial warfare is elegant and meticulous. Real commercial warfare is simple, brutal, and destructive. He'd thought it was a joke. He no longer did. Name sneered. "People from the Reach talk about chivalry, but it's just talk. They're lucky to live on fertile land. They don't know starving under the sun or scraping by in snow. When your belly is always full, you can sound noble." By the 5th day's sunset, the high walls of Lighthouse Keep were stained red. The great hall was full. The air inside felt like a weight. Arthur walked through the crowd, and the people parted for him. When he took his place at the Lord's high table, the hall fell silent, and every face was grave. "What exactly happened?" Arthur's voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Old Instructor was the first to step forward. He'd been retired at Meteor Keep when a servant roused him in the night. Meteor Keep lay north of Lighthouse Keep and shared a border with it. From his tower, he had seen the flames near Peach Garden and gathered the non-conscripted soldiers and servants to help put out the fire. Apart from those who came from Lighthouse Keep itself, Old Instructor had been among the second wave to arrive. "Many of our soldiers had been conscripted for the war and had not yet returned," Sir Bard said, his left arm in a bandage. "I imagine Lighthouse Keep was in the same situation. When I led the remaining guards and servants to the orchards, I saw men in identical uniforms moving through the dark, setting fires everywhere," Old Instructor said. His voice began to shake. They didn't spare the relief shelters or the refugee houses outside Peach Garden. They killed anyone they saw and burned every house. These weren't Ironborn, and they weren't like the Free City pirates I've seen. They weren't after plunder or captives, just killing and destroying. Old instructor hesitated, searching for the right words about the attacker's identity. Arbor, Earl Paxton, Arthur said flatly. No one gasped. The conclusion had been forming in everyone's minds. Are there any survivors from the people who went to put out the fire, or those who lived near Peach Garden? Arthur asked Maester Hubert. Pete's attendant Jerry, a few children from the relief shelter, and some farmers and workers who escaped by luck, Maester Hubert answered. Call Jerry, Arthur said. He remembered Jerry. Pete had kept him close, teaching him by example. Pete and Jerry had been close, almost like friends. Have the dead been buried? Arthur asked. The Silent Sisters collected and buried the bodies, Maester Hubert replied. Now that the conscripted soldiers have returned, we've begun clearing the ruins. The Peaches weren't all destroyed. There's some hope. Arthur cut him off with a raised hand. No matter how well we rebuild, if they come again, it will be for nothing. Destruction is easy. Construction is hard. Clearing and rebuilding can wait until we've settled this with Redwine. Arthur, are you prepared to go to war with Redwine? Old instructor asked, understanding Arthur's meaning. Our naval power in Starfall City cannot match the Arbor fleet. Without ships, our soldiers can't cross the strait to Arbor. That's true, Arthur said, but this war must be fought. He looked around the hall. Since we can't attack them now, we prepare our defenses. They spent the evening going over coastal defenses and vigilance along Starfall City's territory to guard against more sea attacks. In the end, Arthur wove the council's suggestions into a plan. Sir Bard would recruit conscripted soldiers from coastal vassals, form alert units, and organize regular coastal patrols. Lighthouses would be built at coastal castles, and beacon towers set every 5 miles as an early warning system to relay alarms quickly. Honeywine Castle, the Arbor. Earl Paxton Redwine stood by the window, long fingers tapping a crystal wine glass and sending small ripples through the golden liquid. He turned suddenly, his robe whispering against the corner of a gilded oak table, voice taut with suppressed anticipation. Desmond Redwine let a sneer curl at one corner of his mouth. As you ordered, cousin. We sailed in under the guise of pirates and burned the Peach Garden to the ground. Everyone there was killed. With most of Lighthouse Keep's men called away to war, the place was left undefended. We razed it completely, even the wine cellar. It'll be 2, maybe 3 years before they produce another bottle of that amber peach wine. Earl Paxton could not hide his pleasure. Well done. Relief poured out of him like the drained weight from a chest. He had feared the new agency model combined with amber peach wine would steal Arbor's market for golden wine, but he had no intention of adopting that model and giving up his own share. So when Snow led his troops north against the Brymonts, Paxton had taken advantage, sending his cousin Desmond and a portion of the Arbor fleet disguised as pirates to strike first. The brilliance of the ruse was that it provided deniability. Even if Snow discovered evidence, a vehement denial would leave him impotent before the Iron Throne. He could not hope to sail past the Arbor fleet to strike them back, and even if Starfall troops landed on the island, they could be starved out behind a blockade. Paxton had seen enough sieges to know how quickly the best warriors were undone without food. How do Snow and the Braymonts fare against one another? He asked. There are reports that Lola Braymont has given her 2 children to Snow as attendants, Desmond replied. Snow has even arranged a match. Paxton narrowed his eyes. Snow is the sword of the morning, after all. No lack of martial skill. I had intended to work with them on amber peach wine if the Braymonts prevailed. He sighed, but kept his voice guarded. Keep ships watching Starfall City. I don't fear a landing on Arbor, but it's better to nip things at sea. If Snow grows reckless enough to try a surprise landing, he went on, they'll have to run the Arbor fleet. If they somehow make landfall, we can retreat to the castle and blockade their supplies. Even the bravest soldiers starve without food. Stannis in Storm's End is an example. I won't keep using this method forever. It's not honorable. After a while, when Snow accepts reality, I'll give him a way out and bring him back to the table to negotiate. You think ahead, cousin, Desmond said. I don't believe they mean to land, Desmond added after a moment. Paxton raised an eyebrow. Why not? They're building lighthouses and signal fires, not ships. That will make future attacks harder, Paxton observed. Destroying Peach Garden again won't be so easy. The risks will be greater, failures more likely. There are always moments of weakness, Paxton said with a shrug. And this was a one-time measure. We have the advantage for now. Let them learn. I'll keep watching them, Desmond promised. I trust you, Paxton said, and for the moment the matter was settled. On a sunny slope east of where Peach Garden had stood, a mass grave yawned. Most of the dead from the attack lay there, and in the distance the blackened orchard scarred the land with its ruined trunks. The smell of char still hung in the air. My lord, this is Sir Pete's marker. Jerry's voice was hoarse, his eyes swollen and red. Arthur looked at the simple stone and sank to one knee. He laid a flower before it and spoke quietly, remembering. I still remember your plan in Bravos, the orphanage you wanted to open, to take in street children and teach them. You said even a scrap of bread and a bowl of thin porridge would be enough for the ones who wanted to learn. He smiled through the grief. I never thought the gods would mock us so cruelly. Take you and take the orphanage with you. But it won't be for nothing. I'll build more orphanages in Starfall City to feed and teach children. I'll name them after you. His fingers traced the rough stone. And as for the Redwines who burned Peach Garden and killed you and the others, Paxton and his house will answer for this. They will pay. Jerry fell to his knees, tears spilling at last. My lord, let me fulfill Sir Pete's last wish. He was everything to me. He taught me, raised me. He only struck me when I was bad. The night they attacked, he saved me. His voice broke. When he shoved me away, the pirates' knives were already gods if it had to be. Let it have been me. Arthur said nothing. He helped Jerry up and led him into the blackened orchard. The charred trunks stood like twisted corpses. The ground was powdered with soot. Arthur took hold of a tree at random. Its main trunk had cracked in two and been charred to black, the lower section scorched and splintered. Take care of this peach garden, Arthur said. He ran his hand along the blackened bark, brushing away the carbonized crust. Beneath the salt-darkened charcoal, a thin line of green shivered into being, like a vein of emerald in coal. A faint, almost inaudible imprint seemed to pulse from the wood. Peach Garden Oath ensures the survival of peach trees within a half-league radius and accelerates their growth. The harsher the environment, the more slowly they recover. I like an Ironborn saying, Arthur murmured, staring at the tender green against the black ruin. What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger. He looked at Jerry. If you want to take up Sir Pete's work, you must do it better than he did. This, how? Jerry had already begun to move. He ran from tree to tree, touching trunks and stirring the green to life wherever he found it. He returned to Arthur blackened from ash, hands trembling. My lord. He balled his left hand, only 3 fingers remaining, into a fist. I swear to the old and the new gods, I will tend this peach garden. I will build orphanages in Starfall, and not only there, throughout Westeros. I will do better than Sir Pete. Chapter 173. Arthur's Countermeasures. Perhaps out of his regard for Pete, Arthur had intended Jerry, Pete's ward and pupil, to eventually take over as acting city lord of Lighthouse Keep. But Jerry was young and lacked standing, so Arthur set him to the safer task of restoring Peach Garden first, to win achievements and build influence. For the post at Lighthouse Keep, Arthur left the old instructor to serve as a transitional figure. He also sent Rosso Brunn and the cavalry to garrison Lighthouse Keep and assist Sir Barton with coastal defense. Once the defenses along the Starfall City coast, Lighthouse Keep, and Peach Garden were in order, Arthur began his countermeasures against House Redwine. In the small hall of Lighthouse Keep, candlelight trembled over a table. Scholar Hubert pushed his glasses up his nose and read the letter aloud. Earl Paxter Redwine led the Arbor Fleet, disguised as Ironborn from the Iron Islands, in a surprise attack on the coastal lands of Starfall City, burning, slaying, and pillaging along our shores. They burned septs and murdered septons, tortured and killed children, women, and the elderly, committing countless crimes, and sought to provoke war between the Iron Islands and Dorne. perhaps even involving the Iron Throne. All coastal lords of Dorne are urged to prepare their defenses and not be deceived by the schemes of Earl Paxter Redwine. Sir Arthur Snow, guardian of the Torrent River, acting city lord of Starfall City, Sword of the Morning. When Hubert finished, Arthur nodded. Send it as written. Make sure the principal lords of the Iron Islands, Dorne, the Reach, the Iron Throne in King's Landing, and the Faith of the Seven all receive this. Hubert's Adam's apple bobbed. My lord, won't this be too harsh on Lord Paxter? You agree? Arthur's smile didn't reach his eyes. He waved a hand. Perfect. Send it. Peach Garden was gone, and Starfall City had no fleet to answer a house that acted like a pirate. Since he could not redress the wrong under the present conditions, Arthur chose to make it everyone's problem. Let the outrage be broad and public. If it becomes the concern of many, it is easier to force a response. And if it still failed, he would not quietly swallow the loss of Peach Garden. After Hubert left with the letter, Namelia, who had been idly fingering a dagger etched with a snowflake, smiled. Arthur, you're clever. I thought you'd raise an army and strike at Redwine. I am always cautious about war, Arthur said. Besides, Redwine didn't openly raise his banners. If we strike first, Starfall City will be put on the defensive. Nomelia sheathed the dagger, admiration in her dark eyes. Sometimes ravens and ink can be more effective than swords and armor. That was a wise move. Arthur leaned back, composed. This is not the end. The letter is only the first step. Nomelia blinked. You have other plans? I was not going to sit by and only curse from afar, Arthur said, a faint grin tugging at his mouth. You should drop that notion. You have no ships. You can't cross the strait. I have no ships and cannot cross the sea, Arthur admitted, but I have legs and I can cross mountains. Arthur didn't know how deeply Highgarden was involved in the attack on Peach Garden, but Paxter Redwine was married to Mina Tyrell, and his aunt was Olenna, the Queen of Thorns. Through marriages, Olenna had bound other Reach houses, Hightower, Rowan, Fossaway, into the Tyrell network. Though the Tyrells' ancestors had been stewards who became wardens of the Reach by concession to the Targaryens, and though Duke Mace was often mocked, their hold on the Reach remained firm. You're going to strike elsewhere in the Reach? Namelia was startled. That's no small matter. One misstep and you could start a war between Dorne and the Reach. What do the wild men of the Red Mountains invading the Reach have to do with Dorne or Starfall City? Arthur asked. If Redwine can disguise his fleet as pirates to plunder, I can drive the clans of the Red Mountains to spill over into the Reach. Namelia breathed more easily. North or west? Before Dorne joined the Seven Kingdoms, the Martells had quietly supported the Vulture Kings of the Red Mountains in defiance of the Iron Throne. The Reach territories that bordered Starfall's sphere were Horn Hill to the north, ruled by Count Randall Tarley, and Queenscrown and Ringbell to the west, held by Count Quinn Roxton, separated by the Red Mountains. Arthur had already decided on his target while on the road to Lighthouse Keep. I will strike Queenscrown in the west, he said. It was a choice he'd weighed during the journey. Randall Tarley of Horn Hill was one of the realm's most formidable commanders, celebrated for his victories and feared by many. His marriage ties to House Florent, whose claim to the Reach's legacy often put them at odds with the Tyrells, only strengthened his position. By contrast, the Roxtons of Queenscrown were far less formidable. Their ancestral Valyrian steel blade, Orphanmaker, was even lost to them. For Arthur, who could marshal the wildling tribes and the mountain legion of the Red Mountains, his southern barbarian invasion advantage, the mountains ceased to be a barrier and became a stronghold. If Redwine held the seas, Arthur would hold the high country. Each would dominate their own element. Namelia's hand rested lightly on his arm. Should I tell Sunspear? Your plan to send the clans into the Reach won't be a quiet thing. Your father and Prince Doran should be warned and ready. Arthur nodded. Yes, this will not be a small war. It's better if they know in advance. Chapter 174. Come on. Big. When ravens flew from Lighthouse Keep's rookery with news of Arthur's accusations against House Redwine, he did not linger. After settling the immediate affairs of the keep, he set out for Shingyi Fort. On the way, he paused at the burnt peach garden. In the woods, Jerry had already organized the children who had survived the orphanage, and a group of farmers and craftsmen to bury the charred remains of the peach trees and clear away the ruined houses. For the people here, I am not a proper lord, Arthur admitted, looking over the tidy, hard-won work. You're being too hard on yourself, Miss Nymeria said in her own blunt way. By that standard, Prince Doran, who hides away in Flowing Water Garden all day, isn't a proper lord either. Nor is the king who hunts, drinks, and prostitutes himself through half the month. Arthur only shook his head. He mounted and urged his horse toward Shinyi Fort. Shinyi Fort lay at the center of Starfall City's territory, and exactly as Arthur had planned, it had become a hub for traffic along the Torrent River. South of the fort, stone houses, inns, and post stations lined the road in neat ranks. Freshly cleared fields and orchards stretched from the fort toward the renovated arena. To the northwest, a wide stone bridge spanned the Torrent River, and the growing blacksmith quarter in Violet Canyon, with its guild workshops, had crept downstream to meet the fort. The road toward High Hermitage to the northeast was already under construction, planned to link up with Knight's Rest Keep and the old route to High Hermitage. A large, open plot in the middle of the settlement was being leveled for a market, the place where surplus produce and goods from all over Starfall's lands would be gathered. Merchant wagons from Dorne and the north came and went there, while riverboats flowed under the bridge. Inside the castle, little had changed, except that the corrals were filling up with horses, almost crowding the space. Standing on the eagle's nest that overlooked the fort, Miss Nymeria watched the scene and smiled. This place is like a child growing up. Every time I come back, it's a little bigger. We passed through from Braemont to Lighthouse Keep, and now we're back in half a month, aren't we? These buildings are springing up like mushrooms after rain. Did you put a spell on the place? Like the peach trees that even the fire didn't kill, Penrose teased as Arthur showed him how to feed Sharpwing. I'm Snow from the north, not some sorcerer from the Shadowlands, Arthur said with a half-smile. How would I know any magic? Zingy Fort's growth had many causes. Its position, the stability under Starfall's rule, the tools and weapons forged in the blacksmith quarter, and the wine from Peach Garden. Success in wars and skirmishes had brought ransoms and captives, which provided cheap labor. The recent burst of expansion was also the result of Administrator Nick's management. He had resettled people from the wildling tribes of the Red Mountains to cultivate fields and build homes south of the fort. Arthur nudged Penrose, who hesitated with a bucket. Be brave, Penrose. Your house's emblem is a vulture. Be brave. Penrose swallowed and stammered. My lord, but it's so big. After Arthur's patient urging, the boy braced himself, set the bucket down, and with trembling hands lifted the meat onto the feeding platform. Arthur coached him. Try to take the strips out and feed them to him. Don't worry, he won't hurt you while I'm here. When Penrose finally fed the bloody strips to Sharpwing, Arthur nodded in approval. A guard arrived then, bowing. Lord, the sir you summoned are all here, waiting in the small hall. Penrose, finish feeding all these buckets before I come back, Arthur said as he left. And be careful not to feed yourself to Sharpwing. In the small hall, a long, heavy oak table dominated the room. A detailed map lay across it, indicating the Red Mountains and Queenscrown. Sir William, Sir Bard, Gerald, Jimmy, and Guy and Xiongdi were already seated, talking in low tones. When Arthur pushed the door open, everyone rose. Please sit, Arthur said, taking the head of the table. How are things with the Red Mountains tribes? The Mountain Legion has reached 400 men as planned, Sir Bard reported. Families of the regulars and the reserves have been relocated, some settled in Violet Canyon, most here and at Dawn Market. Xiongdi tapped a mark on the map with a thick finger. Most of the two tribes that rebelled alongside the Vulture tribe moved into the old Vulture territory and are building Eagle's Hidden Keep. The leaders of the wildling bands upriver, after you subdued the Brahman family, have been sending their offspring to Eagle's Hidden Keep to show submission, Gerald said. You can say now that all the wildlings in the Torrent River basin of the Red Mountains have pledged to you. Arthur studied the map of Queenscrown. I plan to strike at the Reach, he said bluntly. Yes, Arthur nodded without hiding his intent. I believe everyone knows that Peach Garden was attacked and burned by pirates. He told them what he had seen at Lighthouse Keep, the conjectures of those there, and his own plan. Sir Bard slammed his palm on the table. Redwine is an old house, 1,000-year heritage, and they behave like thieves. His face reddened. They've spit on the honor of knighthood. Honor? Gerald sneered, sipping his unsweetened lemonade. They dressed up as pirates and then denied everything. Who will care in 10 years? House Redwine has Tyrell's backing and the Arbor fleet. No one can touch them. Among the lords of the Seven Kingdoms, strength matters. Appearances only matter if they matter. Precisely, Arthur said coldly, which is why we must respond, but not with a rash, all-out war. He traced a rote on the map with his finger. First, I will have the tribal leaders send scouts and small units into Queenscrown to learn their dispositions and the terrain, while we harry their villages along the way. When the time is right, he tapped hard on the dot marking House Rockton's ancestral seat, Ringing City. Then we'll hit hard. I'm going to teach the people of the Reach a lesson they won't forget. Chapter 175, Riverbend Response. Just as Arthur Snow was planning something big for the Reach, trouble stirred on the Arbor. In the council hall of Honeyford, Earl Paxton's face was hard as flint as he stared at the accusation letter, meticulously compiled by Arthur Snow with a craftful mixture of truth and lies. He crumpled it into a ball. "Meister!" he barked. "Write at once a letter refuting Snow's slanders. Make clear how baseless his accusations against House Redwine are. Stress that Snow seeks to cover his own failures as a lord, his neglect of the lands he was charged with, which allowed a church to be burned and common folk to be killed, and that he fabricates facts to shift the blame." The Meister bent, retrieved the paper, and smoothed it carefully. "As you command, my lord." He dipped his quill. "I will emphasize his bastard status in the reply." "Exactly." Paxton slammed his palm on the oak table. The wine glasses jumped and chimed. "Let everyone know a bastard's word is as untrustworthy as his birth." "Yes, my lord," the master said. "Everyone knows bastards are born of desire and deception, and their words cannot be trusted." Lady Mina, gently stroking her husband's tense arm, watched him with a flash of worry. "Paxton, Snow has thrown off all pretense with this move. Now the quarrel between our houses and Starfall City is out in the open. There's no turning it back." Paxton exhaled slowly. The worst of his anger eased. He went to the window and looked toward the harbor where the Arbor fleet rode at anchor. "Since that's so," a spark lit his eyes as he turned. "Starfall City was attacked by pirates, was it not? House Redwine answers offenses with resolve. Desmond, take half the fleet and aid Starfall in guarding its coast." A cold sneer tugged his mouth. "Inspect every merchantman bound for Starfall's waters. See if any hide pirates among their cargo." "Immediately, my lord," Desmond replied at once, his eyes bright with excitement. Whether a ship truly harbored pirates would now be for him to decide, and that was a very profitable privilege. Lady Mina sipped her wine and added, "We must send an envoy." She set down the glass and tapped the table lightly. "Demand that Snow retract his accusations and apologize to the Arbor, and at the same time, we must tell my mother the whole truth." Paxton frowned. "Send an envoy, yes, but tell your mother the truth." He understood why Lady Mina insisted. An envoy could serve as a spy, bringing back news of Starfall's defenses and movements. If Snow chose to back down, the envoy would open channels for negotiation. If Snow killed or mistreated the envoy, it would prove his cruelty and give Paxton cause to act. "It is true that Arthur Snow is a bastard," Mina said, calm and firm, "but he has risen to be Sword of the Morning and the acting Lord of Starfall. He is no ordinary man. We must be fully prepared. Now that he has dropped his mask, he will act again. We should tell Mother everything. Although she mocks us at times, my mother never fails to advance the family's interests," Paxton said, squeezing his wife's hand. "Then I must trouble you, Lady Mina, to make the trip yourself." The moment was urgent. The weakness of Lighthouse Keep could not be exploited forever. Paxton had feared that sending ravens would leak their plans, which was why he had not informed the Queen of Thorns before the attack on the Peach Garden, an omission Lady Mina understood and supported. Taking decisive action against a rival who threatened House Redwine's foundations left him little choice. Far away, in Highgarden's rose gardens, morning dew scattered prismatic light across the petals. In the pavilion, the Queen of Thorns, Olenna, studied the same letter, which had been sent from Lighthouse Keep. "How do you read this?" she asked. A mix of truth and falsehood, Margery answered, setting the letter on the table. Arthur Snow struck agency agreements with 3 other lords during the tourney instead of aligning with Earl Paxton. This conflict was bound to follow. The land routes for amber peach wine cannot be sealed by the Arbor Fleet. If Paxton wants to stifle the trade and sale of that wine, the only remaining option is to destroy the source. Often the best move for House Redwine is to keep the fleet intact. Starfall's retaliation won't touch them. Strategically, it's a shrewd, cold calculation. Olenna nodded with satisfaction and called to the twin guards at the pavilion door. Left hand, right hand, bring the painter and the singer. Then, leaning toward her granddaughter in the tone of the Queen of Thorns, she continued, Paxton is clever and thorough. Arbor and Starfall are separated by a strait. He cannot press his advantage further. But the Reach borders Starfall, and there are rumors that not only the Braymonts, but even the Red Mountain wildlings, those who shout they will not bend the knee, have been cowed by Arthur Snow. Could he be truly a warrior reborn, as the bards sing? He trains a giant bald eagle, and his skill with the bird is praised, Margery said, alert to Olenna's implication. Grandmother, do you mean Arthur might strike at the Reach for revenge? At that moment, the singer and the painter arrived. The blue bard, winner of Starfall's poetry and music contest, walked into the garden in vivid blue, harp in hand. Behind him came a white-haired Lycene painter, his violet-blue eyes curious as he took in the roses. Olenna answered in a dry voice. He would need the brains of our Lord Chubby Fish to mount a grand campaign. More likely, he will stir the wildlings of the borderlands to constant harassment. When the lords there can no longer bear it and cry to Lord Chubby Fish for aid, our fat friend will be tempted by the glory of conquering the Red Mountains. Margery's face clouded with worry. Her father, as Olenna suggested, was exactly the sort to be lured. What should we do? Olenna did not reply at once. Instead, she turned to the painter. Paint my granddaughter. If your work pleases me, you will be named Court Painter of Highgarden. The artist set up his easel and bowed. To paint Lady Margery would be my greatest honor, whether or not I become court painter. Humph, Olenna said. I hope your talent matches your flattery. The blue bard plucked a few notes and asked, Ladies, what would you like to hear? The Bear and the Maiden Fair, Margery murmured, her thoughts still on her grandmother's warning. As the harp's melody filled the air, Olenna leaned close and whispered into Margery's ear. Lord Renly will soon return to the Stormlands. I will have our Lord Chubby Fish take you to meet him and present your portrait to the king. Margery's eyes brightened. Grandmother, you mean? Olenna's smile was sharp and knowing. As compared to fighting the wildlings of the Red Mountains, making you queen would grab our chubby friend's attention far better. Early morning in the small hall of Xingyi Fort. As usual, Arthur ate while listening to Scholar Hubert read the morning dispatches from across Starfall City, carried by Raven, a habit he'd taken to lately. Hubert pushed his spectacles up his nose, sorted through the day's letters, and drew one out. This is from Sir Bard at Eagle's Nest Fort, he said. He's already led 400 Mountain Legion men to garrison the place. He cleared his throat. His voice was a little rough. The letter says that after receiving the weapons and equipment we supplied, several tribes from the Red Mountains have sent small bands of wildlings to Queenscrown to harry nearby villages and outposts. Arthur swallowed a piece of white bread and took another sip of the cheaper sweet wine they kept for table use. Tell them in your reply that raids and infiltrations are for reconnaissance, not pitched battle. Their task is to learn Rockton's deployments. If they run into danger, they must fall back to the Red Mountains at once. Having gotten used to amber peach wine, the summer red tasted flat to him, close enough, but poor company for the real thing. He added, once Sir Bard has verified Rockton's dispositions, order him to burn a village or outpost. Make the reconnaissance cover the withdrawal. What about prisoners? Hubert asked. All of them. We are not House Redwine. Arthur set his glass down, speaking calmly. Anyone who resists and refuses to surrender, kill them, regardless of age or sex. Those who surrender, release them after the village is burned. Before they go, tell them they were attacked and their homes burned because House Redwine's men, disguised as pirates, slaughtered the elderly, the children, and those who yielded. Hubert bowed his head and wrote quickly. The quill scratched over the parchment as ink bled into the grain. He set the letter aside to dry and reached for the next missive. Penrose quietly handed him a glass of lemonade. Hubert accepted it with a grateful nod, swallowing to moisten his throat. "This one's from Sir Carlo," Hubert said. "He's reinforcing Braemont City's defenses as you ordered and rushing manpower to gather the grain north of Braemont." He cleared his throat again, his voice steadier. "He also asks for more scouts to the north to watch House Tarley of Hornhill. There's no sign yet that Hornhill is raising levies." Arthur had already finished his food and was studying a supply list Pike had brought for the Mountain Legion garrison. He signed and stamped it, then answered, "Tell Carlo not to be careless. I know the road from Hornhill to Braemont is rough and hard for large bodies to move, but we must guard against sudden strikes from small, elite units." "House Tarley's words are first in battle," Arthur went on. "Randall Tarley is a renowned general in the Seven Kingdoms. We must be vigilant." Braemont City mattered to Starfall. It sat upstream on the Torrent River at the meeting of two rivers, flanked east and west by the Red Mountains, with hills and woods to the north, terrain that could grind an invading army to pieces. If the Reachmen ever took Braemont, they could use it as a springboard down the torrent and expose the heartlands of Starfall City. Historically, the Reach favored Prince's Pass, the Stoneway, or seaborne landings, but with Redwine's naval power, anything was possible. Arthur had used the torrent as a defense against the Vulture King. He had no intention of letting it become a weapon turned against him. He remained cautious. Hubert sipped the lemonade and went on. "Reports from Lighthouse Keep and Starfall City say the Arbor Fleet has been spotted in the Summer Sea. They've blockaded vessels at Starfall Port. And a messenger left Starfall yesterday to seek you here at Shingy Fort," Hubert added. "By my reckoning, he should arrive today." Arthur was not surprised by a blockade. That was the sea's advantage. A naval blockade without land support would hurt Starfall, but not immediately. What worried him more was that control of the sea gave Redwine the initiative. Coastal raids or an advance up the torrent would be hard to parry. He had relied on the river as a shield. It might become the Reach's spear. "Anything else?" he asked. Hubert fumbled another envelope. "The rest are from our vassals. Estimates on how long the harvest will take, mostly 2 to 4 weeks." "Reply and tell them to store at least half the harvest," Arthur said, "and to cut back on using grain for brewing wine." Compared with the arid sands of Dorne, the Torrent River Basin had plenty of fresh water and good yields. One reason Arthur had felt confident growing the Mountain Legion without starving his people. In the afternoon, he rode out with Karen and Nick to inspect the harvests and the storerooms of manors within Jingi's domain. The sun baked the fields. Dust rose in the air with the smell of ripe grain. Farmers bent in the rows, linen shirts soaked with sweat. Women and children followed, gathering ears left behind. "The 7 gods have blessed us this year," Karen said from his saddle, wiping his brow. "From what I see, yields are almost 20% better than last year." "There'll be more next year," Nick added, tired but smiling at the sight. "Since I settled here, Shingi Fort has taken in over 2,000 free folk, and 7 new manors have been opened and planted along the southern torrent." "A good harvest is worth more than many victories," Arthur admitted. Farming sat in his bones more than war. They checked several granaries, dark and full with last year's stores. The air was thick with grain and dried straw. Arthur let a handful of wheat fall through his fingers and listened to the soft rustle of kernels. Grain was the bedrock of war. Where food existed, fear did not. As the sun sank, they returned to Shingi Fort. Long shadows stretched from the walls. The banners hung slack on their poles. As Arthur's party approached the gate, the guards straightened at once. "Lord Arthur." A sentry stepped forward and saluted. "The envoy from House Redwine has arrived. He's waiting in the reception hall." Chapter 177, Redwine's Emissary. In the reception room, Arthur found the 2 envoys from Earl Paxton Redwine waiting, a knight and his squire. The knight had a round face, narrow eyes, a flat upturned nose, and a sturdy, corpulent build. The squire, the same age as Penrose, was thin and freckled. He clutched a white flag of truce to his chest. "Sir Arthur." As Arthur entered, the round-faced knight pressed a hand to his chest and bowed. I am Sir Norbert, a landed knight of Piggy Island. This boy is my squire, Pag. The squire bowed awkwardly, fingers worrying at the corner of the flag. Arthur noticed and motioned for Penrose to take him out to rest. Once the door closed, Arthur settled into the high-backed lord's chair and asked, "Piggy Island? I've not heard of it. Is it near the arbor?" As the knight said. Norbert's round face flushed with pride. "Piggy Island is a dependency of the arbor. I come under the orders of my liege, Earl Paxton." "And what did Earl Paxton send you to tell me?" Arthur asked. Norbert's pride drained. He smoothed his expression, trying for dignity, an effort that only emphasized his double chin. "My lord, I am sent to demand that you retract your accusations against the arbor and publicly apologize." He straightened, trying to make his voice sound commanding. "If you do, the arbor fleet will cease inspections of merchant ships to and from Starfall City immediately." Arthur tapped his fingertips on the armrest, amusement flickering in his violet eyes. He had no idea where Paxton had dug up this fellow, yet Norbert delivered his part with conviction. Seeing Arthur's silence, Norbert took that for assent and pressed on. "You can say you were misled by your men. That would save face for both sides." Arthur's smile was small and dry. "Sir Norbert," he said, "did you ever offend Paxton Redwine yourself?" "Why does my lord ask?" Norbert's confusion showed for a moment. "I have sworn fealty and been loyal to him." "Let us suppose a thing." Arthur's tone chilled. "A band of men storms into your lands on Piggy Island. They burn your houses and fields, kill your brothers and your subjects. You accuse them of atrocities. Then their leader, learning of your accusation, sends someone to demand an apology." Arthur's face was hard now, all warmth gone. His voice, when he spoke, sounded as if through clenched teeth. "If it were you, Sir Norbert, how would you treat the men who burned your home and murdered your people?" Norbert wiped cold sweat from his brow. "My lord, I am an envoy." He lifted the white flag as if it were a shield. "Your lord did not spare the identities of those he slew, men, women, priests, children, orphans. None were spared." Arthur's words came out like blows. "I do not know if you took part in what was done, but I do know this. In Paxton Redwine's eyes, your life and your squire's life are pawns to soil my name." "Pawns?" Color fled Norbert's face. The truth in Arthur's words landed heavy. A liege treats his vassals as dirt, and a vassal begins to see his liege as an enemy. He treats you so, and yet you would risk your life for him. Struggle showed in Norbert's eyes. After a long moment, he sank to one knee. "My lord, I am willing to serve you. I swear it by the Seven and my knightly honor." Arthur helped him to his feet. "Very well, Sir Norbert. I will not treat you as Paxton treats his vassals." He leaned forward. "I will send you back to Arbor with false intelligence for Earl Paxton." At that, Norbert's eyes narrowed in hope. Before he'd left, he had been summoned alone by Earl Paxton, told of the dangers of the mission, and promised that his son, brought to Arbor as an adopted child, would be granted all of Piggy Island's lands. To earn the trust of the Sword of the Morning and return home safely, the prospect glittered. He bowed eagerly. "As you command, my lord." Arthur patted his shoulder, as if in approval. "To avoid arousing Paxton's suspicion, I will have you receive a dozen hard strokes with a stick." Norbert, still picturing the rewards, blinked. "Ah, that's not Ness." Arthur's voice boomed through the hall. "Guards, drag this knight from Arbor out and give him 14 strokes with a stick to vent my hatred." 2 wolfish guards surged in, wordless. They hoisted Norbert's weighty body, his feet swinging uselessly, his cloak, embroidered with his house's sigil, dragging in the dust. Soon the courtyard filled with the sounds of birch on flesh and Sir Norbert's high, porcine screams. He was bent over the whipping bench. The blows fell fast. Blood rose and stung his swollen flesh after only a few strikes. The guards cried out as they struck, trying to give righteous voice to their blows. "For the children you slew," one shouted. "For the 7," another called. Steward Ma, perched on the railing above, spat, "Beasts of Arbor. If Lord Arthur were not merciful, I'd drown you in a cesspit." From the kitchen, the cook's head popped out. She waved a ladle and shouted, "Marrow, Carol, haven't you eaten? Hit harder. I'll save you a slice of roast pork pie tonight." When the 14 blows were done, Sir Norbert was carried into a guest room like a sack of mud. He lay on the bed, burning pain along his buttocks and back, and gritted his teeth. This was suffering that led to reward, he told himself. Once he reported the crucial intelligence about Starfall City to Earl Paxton, all this would be worth it. Thinking of the favor and the lands promised, the pain receded to a distant throb. Chapter 178, Norbert's Discovery. Norbert's Guest Chamber. Maester, I've examined your injuries. Although your backside is a mess, fortunately the blow didn't break any bone, Schaller Hubert said, his gray robe sleeve stained with blood from cleaning Norbert's wounds. He pulled a bottle from his wide sleeve and set it on the bedside table. This is poppy milk. If the pain keeps you from sleeping tonight, it will help. Thank you, Maester, Norbert murmured, his voice thin and faint as if he were dying. Thank Lord Arthur and the vows I swore as a Maester that you would tend to an envoy from House Redwine. Scholar Hubert's mouth twitched into something like a smile. I'll send for a servant. Your page, your boy, should be here. I haven't seen him since the reception. May the Seven bless you, Scholar Hubert. If you could call my page. Page, here please. Norbert tried to raise his sweaty, round face, but winced in pain. I'll have someone fetch him, Hubert said, gathering his instruments and leaving the room. Norbert dabbed the sweat from his forehead with a hand and groaned. He couldn't move properly for a few days, which meant he couldn't go about gathering information himself. If his page could be trusted to watch and listen, children tended to loosen tongues and reveal things adults would not. He resolved to wait for Page and give him instructions. Minutes dragged by. Every movement sent fresh thorns of pain through his back and buttocks. Just when he was about to surrender and drink the poppy milk, the door creaked and the boy stepped in. Sir, you called me. Page looked a little sulky as he shut the door. Gods, what happened to you? The boy blurted, eyes widening at the sight of Norbert's bandaged, still blood-stained rear. Close the door and come here, Norbert ordered, lowering his voice once the door was shut. Is anyone outside? No, sir, Page said, shaking his head. A lock of flaxen hair fell across his puzzled eyes. Who beat you like this? Did you do something wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. This is a warrior's wound, Norbert lied, adjusting himself with a grimace. Not important. Where have you been? Page clutched at his doublet. I went to the torrent with Penrose and the other pages my age. Those children didn't bully you? They didn't hit me, sir. Page's expression darkened a little. They made me play a game where I had to pretend to be an arbor man. They all rushed to declare my pardon because the warriors of Starfall City don't harm innocent children, elders, and women like the arbor men do. Norbert forced a kind smile. Good. Besides playing games, did you hear anything interesting? Page blinked, thinking, then his eyes brightened. During the game, the weapons master's son said his father was ordered by the Lord to make a weapon to deal with the arbor fleet. He said that if the arbor fleet dares to sail into the torrent, it'll have no way back. How could that be? Norbert scoffed. The arbor fleet is the largest in Westeros, 200 warships, not to mention the merchant galleons, wine barges, and other craft. There's no weapon in this world that could make them have no return, aside from dragons. Page nodded. We didn't believe him either. Penrose and the others laughed. But the weapons master's son said he would take us tomorrow to see what they're building. May I go see it, sir? Go if you must, Norbert said, careful. But promise me you'll listen more than you speak and tell me everything you see. And don't tell anyone about our conversation. After Page promised repeatedly, Norbert drank the poppy milk and slept. When he woke, it was already noon the next day. The pain had eased considerably, though he still couldn't rise from bed. The day passed with only servants bringing food and Scholar Hubert checking his wounds. There was nothing useful to report, no intelligence of value. Then, in the evening, Page returned with news. The boy made a measuring motion with his hands. The weapon is like lots of very thick iron rings linked together. Nearly every smith across the torrent, except the weapons master himself, is forging these iron rings. Iron rings linked together? Norbert repeated, frowning. Having been raised on the arbor, Norbert knew the methods used against ships. Rams, long hooks to tear sails or snag ships, boarding claws, gangplanks, those were familiar. On land, there were scorpions, ballistae, and trebuchets. Chains used to capture an entire fleet was a new idea, and yet his mind raced. If the mouth of the torrent were blocked by chains, anchored or woven of thick iron rings, and the Arbor fleet sailed in, their retreat could be cut off. Cold sweat ran down Norbert's chin and darkened the sheet. He felt his fat body go suddenly tense. The image of the narrow entrance to the torrent river, exactly the sort of place where a chain across the mouth could trap ships, flashed in his head. "Sir, you look pale," Paige said, worried. Norbert grabbed the boy's wrist suddenly. "Paige, you mustn't tell anyone I was excited. You still act like yourself. Listen, observe, and keep your mouth shut." The next day and the next passed with trivial reports from Paige, nothing more important than the chain story. Norbert clenched his jaw and kept himself from showing eagerness. On the fourth day, he finally got the chance to leave his bed. "Your wound has healed enough," Scholar Hubert announced after a careful examination. "You can walk, though you'll be stiff. Lord Arthur wishes to see you once you are able to get up." "You could have told me that yesterday," Norbert grumbled, but relief flooded him. "Meister, thank you for your care." Chapter 179, Real and False Shinyi Fort, the Eagle's Nest. "Sir, how is your injury?" Arthur asked as Norbert limped in, supported by Paige. He watched the man move with concern. "Why not rest here a few more days?" Norbert was about to answer, but his eyes were drawn to Sharpwing, the great bald eagle perched beside Arthur. He and Paige both instinctively took half a step back. The movement tugged at his wound, and he gasped. "Thank you for your concern, my lord." He sent Paige out of the room, straightened with effort, and forced a smile, his gaze flicking between Sharpwing and Arthur. "After the master's treatment, the wound has scabbed over. If I arrive at Arbor too late and I'm fully healed, I won't win Earl Paxter Redwine's sympathy." "You have a point," Arthur said, nodding. "Very well. Once I've finished telling you what I need, you can leave at once with your attendant." Norbert bowed with difficulty, each movement stiff with pain. "Speak, my lord. I will deliver your words faithfully." Arthur considered for a moment. "When you return, tell Earl Paxter that I was furious at his demand that I apologize, and that I swore to take revenge on Arbor. Say that, with the Arbor fleet separated by the strait, I am helpless against them and must vent my anger elsewhere in the Riverlands." "Where will your lordship strike?" Norbert's voice trembled, from nerves or pain. "Tell him that I have gathered Starfall City's elite troops to retaliate against the lord whose lands border Starfall City, and that our defenses are weak." Arthur's violet eyes fixed on him. "You don't need to know anything more, and you mustn't say too much. Loose lips sink ships." Norbert nodded quickly, sweat beading on his brow. "Your command is correct, my lord." He lowered his head to hide the glint in his eyes. He picked over Arthur's carefully chosen words and, remembering the chains he'd overheard about from Paige, he understood at once. Arthur wanted Paxter Redwine to believe Starfall City vulnerable enough to lure the Arbor fleet up the Torrent River, only to have chains raised and the river blockaded, trapping them like turtles in a jar. Norbert's heart leapt at the thought. This man, who might one day be the Sword of the Morning and rule Starfall City, was far subtler than most imagined. If the trap worked, the Arbor fleet could be annihilated in the river, even their ships seized for a counterstrike on Arbor. He felt secret thankfulness to the Seven Gods. He had uncovered a conspiracy to his advantage. Arthur added a promise. "Do as I say. If this succeeds, I will reward you with a fief, a manor, and gold." "I will." Norbert tried to kneel, but a stab of pain made him draw in a breath. "I will deliver your lordship's words to Earl Paxter Redwine." He left the fort at once, supported by his attendant. Once the carriage rattled away, Lady Name glided from the inner room and came to the window, watching Norbert being helped into the cart. "Arthur," she said, puzzled, "it seems your plan to trap them like turtles in a jar could work. Why did you abandon it?" Arthur stepped to her side, and they both looked out over the torrent river, its surface gleaming gold in the morning light like a dragon winding toward the summer sea. "Time is too short," he said softly. "To build iron chains across the river and the river defense towers and winches that would be needed would take time and cost men we don't have. Most of the workforce is in the fields, harvesting." Lady Name frowned. "But this is the perfect chance, if we could capture or destroy the Arbor fleet." "I don't want Starfall's heartland turned into a battlefield," Arthur interrupted, his fingers tapping the stone sill. "The Arbor fleet aren't fish on a chopping block. I don't intend to drag the city into a fight to the death." She tugged a loose strand of black hair from her bun and considered. "So you sent the Lord of Pig Island home to stop the Arbor fleet from advancing up the torrent. And to let them believe they can," Arthur said. "I injured him so he couldn't travel freely. He's left dependent on the news his attendant brings him. I arranged for that attendant to see and hear half-truths and partial lies." A memory flickered in his eyes. "People tend to accept conclusions they arrive at themselves. I learned that from Desmond Redwine at the Starfall City tourney." "Oh," she said. "I suffered a small loss then," Arthur replied without dwelling. "But after this, we won't be constrained by the Arbor fleet. If we fight harder and bolder elsewhere in the Riverlands and make our actions look desperate, Earl Paxter will think we're trying to lure him into a trap and won't act rashly." Lady Name nodded slowly. "True, people of the Riverlands grow up on open green land. They don't have the stomach for a fight to the death. If they believe Starfall has resorted to a desperate trick, they won't gamble everything and march into the torrent. You'll have achieved your goal." "Play the part fully," Arthur said, waving a hand toward Sharpwing. "Norbert's on his way. I must lead the army to the Red Mountains." He had considered another layer of deception, letting Norbert or his attendant stumble upon plans of collusion with the Florents and Tarleys to raise troops from Braemont and march on Highgarden, sowing discord among Tyrell, Florent, and Tarley. But Arthur abandoned it. The scheme was risky, unlikely to achieve much for Starfall, and the price in men and trust would be too great. Norbert's return to Arbor was painful and hurried. He refused to delay even to rest. The carriage jolted along, and his wound opened and bled several times. He arrived in roughly the same time it had taken him to come to Shingy Fort. At Honeyfort, he presented himself before Earl Paxter Redwine, reciting every detail of his visit to Shingy Fort, the intelligence he'd gathered, and the conversations he'd witnessed with tears leaking from his eyes. Earl Paxter stroked his beard, the grave look in his eyes deepening. He had suspected Arthur Snow would not back down easily, but he hadn't expected him to wage all-out war without the slightest inclination to reconcile. Such resolve was madness in a lord, Paxter thought. Better, then, to hold back and maintain the blockade than to answer a madman blow for blow. "Sir Norbert, you did well," the Earl said finally, pleased. He handed the soldier the appointment letter he'd prepared. "Recover. I will keep my promise." Norbert accepted it with a choked, earnest voice. "Thank you, my lord. Pig Island will be forever loyal to House Redwin." Chapter 180, Eagle Fort. "My lord, I never imagined I'd reach the Riverlands like this." Penrose panted, his black hair plastered to his forehead with sweat as he struggled to keep up with Arthur along the Red Mountain trails. His feet were blistered. Every step hurt. Arthur's stride never faltered. He scanned the layered peaks with those steady violet eyes. "If it were up to me," he said, "I'd be in Eagle Fort, feeding the eagles, signing papers, and judging criminals. But fate has other plans." Since Penrose left the protection of his mother, Countess Nora, to become Arthur's squire, the boy had grown livelier, like a butterfly out of its cocoon. Ever since he took on the care of Sharpwing, his growth spurt had been astonishing. Perhaps the Brymonts really did have a special bond with raptors. Arthur had not intended to bring Penrose on the campaign to Old Hill. When he tried to tell the boy, Penrose's eyes filled with tears, and he begged, "Did I do something wrong? Are you abandoning me?" Arthur meant to send him back for his safety, but Penrose wiped his cheeks, stood firm, and said, "Sir, you can't leave me. I swore to follow you, to obey you, to help clean your weapons and armor and care for the horses and falcons." Reluctantly, Arthur had allowed him to come. He had also permitted 500 of Starfall's best troops to travel with them, 200 archers chosen by Jimmy, and 300 armored guards handpicked by Gerald. Aside from the city's mountain legion and cavalry, they were the finest force Starfall could field. The column marched with discipline, no stragglers, little idle chatter, only boots on gravel and the faint jangle of scabbards. As the sun bled out behind the peaks, they arrived at the former Vulture Tribe lands, now Eagle Fort, before nightfall. Outside Eagle Fort, relocated tribespeople who had rebelled alongside the Vulture Tribe had erected crude huts and tents. Livestock were penned with rough fences, smoke rising from cooking fires into the dusk. Much of the keep served as a military camp for the Mountain Legion. Newly built wooden warehouses and barracks stood alongside older Vulture tribe walls. Low fences enclosed parts of the camp, and two-story wooden watchtowers guarded the corners. It wasn't the Mountain Legion's station in Violet Canyon, but in the unforgiving Red Mountains. Establishing such a post in a few months was an achievement. Arthur planned to garrison part of the Legion here permanently, to make Eagle Fort Starfall City's foothold in the mountains and solidify the city's authority. "There's actually a sept here?" Penrose exclaimed, pointing at a large log building. Inside the open doorway, crude carvings of the Seven could be seen. Several free folk knelt at prayer. "What's so strange about that?" Jimmy said with a chuckle, plucking his bowstring. "When people realize the old gods won't save them in battle, they look for the protection of the winning side. Seeing a sept is a more convincing blessing." Arthur watched quietly. A condition he'd insisted upon after the war was that every tribal land build a sept so the faith of the Seven could spread. The septons stationed at Eagle Fort would preach, but they would also teach hostages' children to read, write, and study the scriptures, practical tools of governance and assimilation. At the gate, a sentry saluted. "My lord, Sir Bard has arranged the camp for the newly arrived troops as ordered." Arthur signaled to Gerald and Jimmy and stepped into the camp. The main tent in the center cast flickering shadows across the canvas as an oil lamp burned inside. Sir Bard stood over a map, a dagger marking a spot. Xiongdi and 3 tribal chiefs watched, their faces drawn. "My lord," everyone saluted. Arthur dismissed the formality with a wave and came to the table, studying a map densely annotated with recent movements in Old Hill. Sir Bard spoke. As instructed, the Free Folk detachment sent by the chiefs scouted the more weakly held areas. I led the Mountain Legion in to burn a village and several outposts. That drew Count Quinn Rookton's attention. He gathered a light cavalry force of over 200 and has used cavalry mobility and beacons for rapid support. He's also concealed troops in some outposts to ambush our harrying parties. Sir Bard added that without better intelligence, pressing another attack might provoke engagement with Rookton's main cavalry, something that could escalate beyond control. So they reverted to small harassment units to gather information rather than risking a full Legion assault. "Where is the Rookton cavalry stationed?" Arthur asked. Xiongdi pointed on the map. "Behind Delling's stronghold, near Echoing Ring City." Delling's stronghold sat in the center of Old Hill territory along the Red Mountains. Echoing Ring City, the Rookton seat, lay to its west. "He chose a good second-line position," Arthur said. "Hard to hit and convenient for support." He remembered Count Quinn Rookton from the Starfall tourney. Rookton had been beaten by 100 Flowers Knight. Sir Bard tapped a faint trail on the map. "There's a gentler route from the Red Mountains to Delling," Sir Bard continued. "The village and outposts we struck were near Delling's stronghold. That minor route, Cobblestone Path, runs west to Echoing Ring City. I think Rookton placed his cavalry to secure that link and protect Echoing Ring." "Besides Cobblestone Path," Arthur asked, "are there any other routes from the Red Mountains into Old Hill like that?" One of the tribal chiefs answered, "There are a few ways toward Duskhold Stronghold and Freedom Mountain, but none are as easy as Cobblestone Path." Duskhold lay north of Delling, Freedom Mountain to the south. Arthur traced the lines on the map, weighing his options. Cobblestone Path's existence and Rookton's positioning explained why the small raids had been repeatedly intercepted. They would need a new plan, one that accounted for cavalry mobility and beacons, if they hoped to press the campaign deeper into Old Hill.